I got isekai'd into a magic academy full of dangerous girls with big melons, and they really did start drooling over me like I was their late-night snack. Years later, the proof stood outside my bedroom. Bianca Ellery sliced my door in half and ordered me to become her husband. I told her no, because the rule was simple: every dangerous woman who wanted me also had enough power to kill me for refusing. Bianca stepped through the broken door in a black uniform, sword still humming, and informed me that my satisfaction as her husband had already been considered. I used the remaining half of the door as a shield and reminded her that consent usually involved 2 votes. She stared at me for one long second, genuinely offended that democracy had reached her bedroom plans. Then, a cat-eyed assassin appeared outside my window and promised she could offer everything Bianca offered, only better and with fewer school regulations. A chained swordswoman dragged herself through the hall. A fire witch leaned over the roof beam. And before I could ask why the ceiling was shaking, a battle maniac crashed through it and demanded first rights to fight me after the wedding. Every woman in that room was trained, gorgeous, and carrying enough steel to erase my security deposit. I was also the weakest man there, so when all 5 started arguing over who got me, I made the only sensible move left and crawled under the bed. Bianca cut the bed in half before I got comfortable. Bianca had expected begging, because powerful people usually confuse fear with agreement. My refusal made her more interested, which made the assassin at the window more competitive, which made the battle maniac demand a duel as part of the wedding terms. The chained swordswoman didn't shout at all. She simply looped one chain around the bed frame and pulled me toward her side of the room. The fire witch burned through the chain. The assassin cut the falling beam. Bianca cut the assassin's knife out of the air. Every rescue became another claim, and every claim turned the room into a smaller battlefield. I finally stood, raised both hands, and told them nobody was marrying anybody while the roof was actively collapsing. Bianca answered that the roof problem could be repaired after the ceremony. That woman had priorities, and unfortunately I was one of them. That room taught me the rule I kept relearning: every woman who wanted me brought another blade, rival, or disaster through the door. So how did an F-rank nobody end up with 5 lethal women fighting over his bed? To answer that, we need to go back to the morning I woke inside the fantasy game I had finished on Earth. My new name was Logan Miller, the forgettable son of a rural noble. Every ordinary combat score attached to my body sat at F rank. Gifted students cracked stone for entrance practice. I could barely dent a practice board. The system showed me the first talent. When someone genuinely tried to kill me, my body jumped toward the highest rank until the danger ended. That sounded useful, so I read the next line. Dangerous, cruel, or evil people would become increasingly curious about me, and most of the worst threats in the game happened to be beautiful women. And you should notice the missing feature: the system gave me no off switch. So yes, my survival build made the most lethal people in the game decide I belonged to them. Fantastic character design, and whoever built it clearly hated peaceful men. My father sent me to the academy with one instruction: stay average, avoid trouble, and never embarrass the family. I promised all 3 while already knowing the game's main events punished anyone who tried to dodge them. If a major route placed a choice in front of me, refusing could get me killed anyway. My survival plan was therefore simple enough to sound stupid: stay unnoticed until the story forced me to move, then move first. That plan lasted until the train ride. The woman across from me was Bianca Ellery, the Academy's student council president, and the future vessel of the gray demon that destroyed half the game. She had pale hair, a perfect posture, and the kind of calm face that made sensible men remember appointments in another county. She also wore a family necklace that created a protective barrier when struck. Bianca noticed me looking and assumed I was another country boy losing a fight with eye contact. She was used to people admiring her from a safe distance, which was fair because the unsafe distance had a body count. I looked away, and that tiny refusal made her curiosity rise before the attack even started. The attack hit before the train reached the academy. A boulder punched through the side wall, students screamed, and a jagged piece of stone flew directly at my head. I couldn't dodge it. Bianca's necklace could stop it, but only if I got close enough to borrow the barrier. So I threw myself across her lap. The necklace flashed, the stone shattered above us, and Bianca caught my shoulder before I rolled onto the floor. From my angle, I had just used the final boss as emergency cover. From hers, an F-rank stranger had seen danger and shielded her with his own body. She asked my name in a voice that made the entire train compartment stop pretending not to listen. "Logan Miller," I answered, climbing off her before the misunderstanding filed paperwork. Bianca repeated my name once, slowly, and decided she would remember it. Meanwhile, the 2 students nearest us had already built a full romance out of 3 seconds and 1 broken wall. The envious one kept staring at me while his friend dragged both seats farther from Bianca because he valued breathing. The follow-up assassins attacked after we arrived. Bianca reached the academy late, her sleeve dark with blood, and casually explained that roughly 12 men had tried to finish the job. She had finished them instead. You see why I was nervous. Bianca arrived with 12 bodies behind her and treated the whole thing like a minor delay. The entrance arena should have been safer. Every incoming trainee received a practice opponent, and all I needed was a forgettable loss. Too bad the last unpaired student was Sabrina Lark, the game's destined heroine and the one person written to oppose Bianca's entire bloodline. Sabrina stepped onto the sand carrying a wooden sword and enough heroic confidence to light the stadium. She was beautiful in the bright, straightforward way that made the crowd lean forward before she even moved, and she hated the Ellery family with a passion usually reserved for actual demons. I was wearing rural clothes, holding the cheapest practice weapon available, and clearly looked like somebody's lost assistant. So Sabrina offered to stage the match. She would swing slowly, I would fall safely, and neither of us would waste time. That was kind, and it was completely useless for the test I needed. My emergency talent only activated under genuine lethal pressure. A polite fake fight would teach me nothing, and the next forced story event wouldn't be polite. I needed Sabrina angry enough to attack for real, so I chose the one sentence guaranteed to ruin her afternoon. I told her I liked Bianca about as much as Sabrina hated her. Sabrina's smile disappeared, and the crowd heard the student council president's name and started whispering. Bianca, watching from the upper platform, went completely still because she had just received a public confession from the boy she believed had protected her on the train. I had meant it as combat bait. Bianca took it as progress. Reverse mastermind problem number 1 had entered the chat. Sabrina warned me to take it back. I refused, because backing down would lower the danger before I learned the talent's limit. She came at me hard enough to split my wooden sword on the first strike, and the shock ran through both arms. Her second swing aimed for my shoulder, but anger had pushed enough force behind it that one bad angle would break my neck. The system recognized real danger. Power slammed through my body, my balance sharpened, the arena slowed, and the F-rank weakling Sabrina expected vanished between one heartbeat and the next. She saw the change too late. I stepped inside her swing and punched her once. Sabrina crossed the arena, broke through the outer wall, and disappeared into a cloud of stone dust. The stadium went dead quiet. Mr. Whitman, the combat instructor supervising the exam, lowered his score sheet and stared at the hole. A medic dropped his bag, picked it up, then dropped it again after checking my verified F-rank reading. Bianca's student council aide stopped writing because the pen had snapped in her hand. Meanwhile, I stared at the wall and hoped I hadn't killed the protagonist during orientation, which would have been a new personal record for ruining a game route. The dust cleared slowly enough for the crowd to form several wrong predictions. Some students expected Sabrina to charge back in and finish me. Others expected the officials to arrest me. Bianca expected me to look toward her, because she believed the confession had powered the punch. Sabrina did none of that. She climbed through the hole, checked that both arms still worked, and stared at my fist as if it had personally insulted the laws of the academy. Then she asked for my name, even though the announcer had already shouted it twice. She wanted to hear it from me. I told her, and Bianca's gaze sharpened because Sabrina had just claimed the same tiny intimacy Bianca had taken on the train. The rivalry started before either woman admitted there was one. Her survival only made the academy officials more nervous. They called the results suspicious because my measured stats hadn't changed. They worried Sabrina's sponsor would withdraw support, so they decided to watch my next move instead of disqualifying me. By dinner, the campus newspaper had my name, a sketch of the broken wall, and 3 different theories involving illegal bloodlines. Before the match, students had looked through me. After it, they stepped aside when I walked past. That status jump felt good for roughly 6 minutes, right until the system opened 2 relationship profiles. Bianca's curiosity had crossed a threshold, which rewarded me with points and a partial imprint of her family's sword style. Sabrina also appeared on the list, even though she was good, which meant the attraction system had rules it hadn't explained. I could use the points, but every reward came from somebody dangerous becoming more attached. It was free power with a romantic tracking device, and every dot on that tracker could kill me. The next evening, Sabrina arrived at my dorm room wrapped in bandages and threatened to break the replacement door if I hid. She had spent the day replaying the punch, and embarrassment had turned into determination. She wanted to understand how an F-rank student had beaten her, and somewhere under that question she also wanted to know why I had defended Bianca so openly. Sabrina tried to ask whether we could get to know each other. She started too formally, restarted halfway through, and finally blurted that punching her through a wall didn't mean we had to be enemies. I told her most friendships began with less structural damage, but I accepted. Her face warmed. Across campus, Bianca heard Sabrina had entered the men's dorm, checked the council housing slate herself, and walked straight to my room before the rumor could cool. Bianca found Sabrina leaving, saw my repaired door, and reached the completely reasonable conclusion that I was hosting private meetings with her rival. She didn't raise her voice. That would have been less frightening. Instead, she announced a new student council rule banning opposite-sex visits in the men's dorm after dark. Sabrina asked when the council had voted. Bianca replied, I am the president, the vote has concluded. I reminded her that she had invented the rule while standing in my doorway. Bianca looked directly at me and added that enforcement would be especially strict in my case. Sabrina folded her arms, decided she would visit me outdoors, and smiled just enough to make Bianca's hand tighten on her sword. So my first week ended with the heroine planning more meetings, the future final boss writing laws around my bedroom, and the entire dorm pretending not to listen through the walls. My father had asked me to stay average. I had already broken an arena, attracted two of the most dangerous women in the story, and started a constitutional crisis over visiting hours. The next morning, the academy rewarded my wall-breaking entrance exam by placing me in the strongest assignment group. That meant Sabrina stayed beside me, Bianca supervised the test, and every ambitious student watched for proof that my punch had been a fluke. Somebody also left the bag of Lucky Bread rolls outside my room with no note. I ate one before considering poison. My survival instincts were developing in a very specific direction. The test took place inside an old stone corridor beneath the main hall. We had to reach the final chamber while instructors changed the route from observation rooms. The rule was simple, students could withdraw at any marked door, but a sealed door meant the exam had entered an emergency state. So when the lights died and every exit locked at once, I knew this was no longer a school test. In the original game, assassins used this exam to kill Bianca. The attackers needed an insider to close the corridor, which meant somebody inside the academy had already sold her route. Sabrina and the other hero candidates only knew the lights had failed, so I pointed them toward a broad hall with two entrances and told them to hold there. Sabrina wanted me beside her. Bianca, watching through the emergency crystal, wanted the same thing for completely different reasons. I told Sabrina the narrow passage behind us would collapse unless somebody checked it, then walked away before she could volunteer. Was it reckless enough to get me killed? Absolutely, but staying with the strongest students meant the assassins would hit Bianca somewhere else, and I would lose the one thing game knowledge was supposed to buy me: timing. A maintenance worker stepped from a side door carrying a toolbox. He asked whether I knew the route back to the control room, and his tone was friendly enough to fool anyone who hadn't memorized this chapter. I had memorized every turn of it. The man was Rafe Callan, a smiling contract killer from an assassin guild, and the system's danger warning lit the instant he moved within striking distance. Rafe looked at my uniform, my cheap boots, and my empty hands. He decided I was an amateur who had wandered away from protection, so he smiled and asked me to lead the way. The man had exactly one warning available. I knew his face. He ignored it because arrogant killers hate wasting a prepared speech, so I used his name, Rafe. He didn't attack immediately. Rafe tested whether I had guessed by asking which guild had sent him, then washed my eyes for the answer. I kept my face blank and gave him nothing, so he leaned against the wall, complimented my nerve, and explained that brave students usually screamed after the first cut. His delay bought Sabrina time to secure the hall and gave Bianca time to leave the observation room. Rafe thought he was stretching fear. I was stretching his mistake. He flicked one needle at the emergency lamp. Darkness swallowed the passage, but the danger warning showed his angle before the blade moved. I shifted half a step, let the wire cut my collar instead of my throat, and heard his confidence rise because he mistook a controlled loss for panic. His smile tightened as the toolbox clicked open and a wire-thin blade snapped toward my throat. Across the corridor, Sabrina's group was already fighting the lesser attackers. She cut down the first masked man, the priestess held the doorway, and the mage froze the floor to stop a second wave. Their teamwork was clean because that was how the game had built them. But Bianca had left the observation room. She found one attacker alive and asked where Rafe had gone. The captive tried the usual brave silence, so Bianca pressed his hand against the wall and cut the stone around his fingers one careful inch at a time. He'd broke before she reached skin. Bianca learned Rafe was alone with me, and her calm disappeared. Meanwhile, the smiling contract killer was enjoying himself. Rafe slashed my sleeve, then my cheek, waiting for panic because professionals like him mistook cruelty for personality. I kept retreating until he committed to a killing thrust. The instant his intent became real, my emergency talent activated, and I caught his wrist before the blade reached my throat. Rafe tried to pull away and discovered the F-rank student's grip had become stronger than his entire shoulder. His eyes changed before anything else. The amusement died, calculation took over, and I used the partial Ellery sword technique I had received from Bianca's profile. I turned his wrist, took his blade, and drove him into the floor hard enough to crack the tiles. He rolled, threw two needles, and came up behind me. I stepped through the blind angle before he could finish smiling, struck his ribs, and pinned his own wire against his neck. Before the fight, Rafe thought I was a toy. 10 seconds later he was measuring every breath against the pressure of his own weapon. He asked what I was. I told him I was the person standing between his guild and Bianca Ellery. Then I ordered him to stop every future attack he could influence, because anyone who wanted her would have to go through me first. That line was partly strategy. Bianca was a future disaster, and keeping her alive delayed the disaster I already understood. Too bad she arrived behind me in time to hear only the part where I called her important. Rafe saw her before I did, and his face went pale because the woman he had been hired to kill was standing in the doorway with blood on her sword, while the weak student holding him down had just claimed responsibility for protecting her. He had prepared for one monster. The room now contained two. Bianca asked whether I meant what I said. I looked at Rafe, then at the blade in her hand, and gave the safest true answer available. I don't make promises I plan to break. Her profile crossed another threshold, and the system paid me with another burst of points. Bianca's expression barely moved, but inside she was rearranging every assumption she had made about me, and none of those new assumptions were healthy for my quiet life. Rafe accepted the order without pretending it was voluntary. Deadly attraction had caught him too, turning fear into a fascinated kind of obedience. I released him with one warning. If Bianca was targeted again, I would assume he had failed on purpose. He vanished through the maintenance route, and Bianca let him go because she trusted my choice more than she trusted the Academy's prison. Judge that decision by the result. Killing Rafe ended one attack, while owning his fear could block the next 10. Bianca's trust felt good and arrived wildly early. An hour later, Director Marshall called us into her office and set the wiped control crystal on her desk. She ran the academy, looked too young for the disaster she had survived, and confirmed somebody inside the school had sold Bianca's root. The proof was thin, but Bianca's response was immediate. She intended to keep me close until she understood me. Then Bianca turned to me and admitted in her cold, formal way that I interested her. Director Marshall raised one eyebrow, and Sabrina, waiting outside the open door, heard enough to step closer. I had defeated an assassin and converted him into a warning line, but the immediate reward was two dangerous women silently arguing over who had the right to investigate me. The academy withheld my class placement because my records still made no sense. Instead, the system assigned me an exclusive mission at the freshman reception: resolve every incident and save as many students as possible. That confirmed the sabotage would continue, and it also guaranteed I would spend the party beside Bianca and Sabrina. My relationship reward offered one copy of a Bianca ability. I could take her current sword skill or wait for something stronger. In the original route, the gray demon inside her eventually awakened with power designed to slaughter other demons. So, I left the reward unused. You already know what that means. I had a loaded weapon in my pocket and chose to wait for the final boss version. Before the reception, I needed a divine defense strong enough to survive whatever the saboteurs released. The hidden item for that route sat inside an abandoned estate beyond the training grounds, so I entered after sunset with a cheap concealment charm and the confidence of a man who had memorized where the floor was supposed to collapse. The relic was an ancient burner used to send offerings into the angelic domain. Beside its stone cradle sat a one-charge dimensional movement charm, so I pocketed that too. One jump, no recharge, and no reason to waste it early. Then I pulled the burner free, and the house immediately proved that game maps hate being touched by real people. The floor cracked, the ceiling dropped, and an entire sealed room fell from the level above. A sleeping woman landed in my arms. Her name was Daphne Drake, a cursed swordswoman who had escaped the Holy Empire and vanished from the original story for years. She woke with silver chains wrapped around both arms, saw a strange man holding her, and attacked before either of us could enjoy the introduction. Her blade moved on its own within a range of roughly 3.5 steps. The rule mattered because inside that circle, the sword could strike from any angle whether Daphne wanted it to or not. My danger boost activated, but the room was collapsing around us, and I had no interest in testing whether falling masonry counted as a second opponent. So I jumped backward exactly 4 steps. The blade stopped an inch beyond its limit. The collapsing house kept forcing us toward each other. A ceiling beam fell behind me, removing the safest retreat. Daphne saw that and advanced exactly 1 step, testing whether hunger or suspicion would win first. Her sword carved a clean circle through the dust, stopping at the edge of its curse as though an invisible wall had caught it. I pointed at the line it had cut and told her the weapon was predictable even when she wasn't. That insult reached her pride, but the smell of the biscuit reached faster. She hadn't eaten a proper meal in days, and the curse hated the way her attention shifted away from isolation. The chains jerked at her wrists, trying to pull the blade toward me without her permission. Daphne planted 1 foot on the chain and held it down, choosing control before she was ready to choose trust. Daphne's eyes narrowed because nobody outside the Imperial Project was supposed to know the range, and she had spent years killing anyone who got close enough to learn it. I reached into my coat slowly, pulled out a recovery biscuit, and tossed it onto the floor between us. She watched the biscuit harder than she watched me. The curse wanted her isolated, angry, and starving because misery made the sword easier to control. Daphne had been alone long enough that food carried more authority than trust. She snatched the biscuit with one chain, smelled it, and ate without lowering the blade. I told her somebody had sent me to make sure she was alive. That was a lie, but the next sentence was true. Her older sister Evelyn was safe inside the Holy Empire. Daphne froze, and the sword jerked toward me before stopping because she had chosen to stop it. Her sister's name reached the part of her the curse had spent years grinding down. She asked how I knew Evelyn, and I told her I could answer after we escaped the collapsing house. She hated the evasion, but she followed me through the broken wall because I had brought food and knew the one person she still loved. Outside, under the trees, Daphne sat at the edge of her attack range and finished every crumb. Daphne lifted her chained sword and asked, very quietly, "Will you come back?" I promised I would, and her blade lowered. Then her profile appeared beside Bianca's and Sabrina's, and the third dangerous woman in my system made my return part of her decision to keep living. Now the question was obvious. Could one ancient burner and one hungry cursed swordswoman give me enough defense before the sabotaged reception? 2 days later, our class toured the sealed battlefield beneath the academy, and I carried the ancient burner under my coat. The public story was simple. Angels and demons had once torn open the region, several academies now maintained the barrier, and students were forbidden to approach the restricted edge. The private story was uglier. If that seal failed, the campus became the first door in a worldwide invasion. Mr. Whitman led the group along the observation path while Sabrina kept drifting beside me and Bianca watched her drift. Daphne remained hidden in the abandoned estate with enough biscuits to buy me 48 hours of peace. So while the class stopped at a memorial wall, I slipped down a service path toward the thinnest point in the barrier. The burner needed rare fuel, which I had taken from the same hidden cache before the house collapsed. I set the pieces inside, pushed mana through the cracked handle, and opened a hole no wider than my fist. White light spilled over the stone, followed by the sound of dozens of tiny hammers. On the other side, a group of angels was rebuilding a damaged structure. They noticed me, formed a defensive line, and prepared for some grand mortal request involving destiny or war. I held up a paper bag of warm rolls from breakfast, and their formation broke immediately. The youngest angel grabbed a roll, bit into it, and made a sound so human that the 2 guards beside him abandoned all dignity. Within seconds, sacred workers were trading pieces, arguing over frosting, and asking whether mortals had invented anything else useful. Their commander tried to restore order until one roll rolled near his boot. He picked it up, tasted it, and stopped pretending he was above the negotiation. I asked for defensive blessings. He asked whether I had more food. I produced a second bag from inside my coat. That earned the kind of silence usually reserved for miracles. Keep your chosen one prophecy. I had carbohydrates and bargaining power. The commander still made me state the stakes. I told him a demon vessel at the academy was awakening early and that the next attack would target hundreds of students. Their rules banned direct intervention but still allowed them to help one mortal survive. So the lunch break became a weapons deal without losing the lunch. The offering multiplied when it crossed the boundary, so one bag became enough food for the entire work crew. An angel near the back abandoned his spear and tackled another worker for the last sweet roll. Their commander watched sacred discipline collapse over cinnamon, decided I was both clever and deeply unserious, and still accepted the second bag. The commander approached the opening and studied me longer than I liked. He saw the dangerous attraction talent buried inside my soul, though he couldn't identify its full origin, and warned that the attention it drew would eventually kill me. Then he said, I carried another undeveloped potential far greater than my current powers. That opened a question the game had never answered. I wanted details, while he wanted another bag, so we compromised like professionals. The commander loaded the burner with 2 linked abilities. One dumped my active power into defense, and the other turned that defense into a sacred barrier. Together they could make my emergency X-rank body a fortress for about 20 seconds. Then my F-rank mana ruined the celebration. I could barely hold either spell for one breath, which gave me a perfect shield with a dying battery. So what good was divine defense that quit before the second hit? I needed more resources before the reception. When I returned to the group, Bianca noticed ash on my sleeve and asked where I had gone. I told her I had been praying. Sabrina heard that and looked impressed. Bianca heard it and decided I was secretly studying ways to cure her family's demon curse. Once again, I tried to hide something and accidentally looked devoted. Reverse mastermind problem number 2 was doing cardio. That afternoon, I entered the Academy's paired combat trial because the winners received access to a vision storage room and extra magical resources. The desk attendant saw my F-rank badge, saw that I had arrived alone, and asked whether I planned to defeat the dungeon through positive thinking. I told him I was waiting for my partner. He looked behind me at the empty hall and laughed loud enough for the other students to join him. Then Sabrina walked through the doors, still bandaged under one sleeve, and asked whether my offer to know each other better included fighting beside me. The attendant stopped laughing so fast he almost swallowed it. Sabrina wanted proof that our arena match hadn't been an accident. I wanted her raw power and the mana rewards at the end, so I told her she could attack while I called the route, and if I gave one bad instruction, she could leave me behind. She accepted, partly because the challenge offended her, and partly because spending an hour alone with me sounded better than she wanted to admit. Bianca was across campus recovering from secret demon training, but word reached her within minutes because the attendant had already told 3 people that the heroine had chosen the F-rank fraud. The first trial mode used controlled monsters and non-lethal traps. That meant my emergency talent stayed asleep, so all I had was game knowledge. I called the first arrow slit before it opened. Sabrina ducked, cut the firing mechanism, and looked back at me with new attention. At the second corner, I told her to strike the floor instead of the visible beast. She broke the hidden trigger, dropped the creature into its own pit, and started smiling. We moved faster after that. I counted trap timing, named blind angles, and warned her when the dungeon tried to fake a safe route. Sabrina handled every attack with clean, brutal efficiency. She was the original protagonist for a reason. Her sword work was direct, her footwork had no wasted motion, and watching her stop pretending to be delicate was doing dangerous things to my concentration. She caught me looking and asked whether I was studying her technique. I told her I was studying several impressive features at once. Sabrina's ears turned red, but she hit the next monster twice as hard, so I considered the data useful. We cleared the standard route in record time. Confetti burst from the ceiling, the board flashed our names, and the desk attendant reread the results until Mr. Whitman took the record sheet from him. Miss Voltage, the Academy's dramatic magic instructor, credited Sabrina's strength. Mr. Whitman pointed at the route map and showed that every shortcut, timing call, and target order had come from me. Ms. Voltage disliked being corrected in public. She claimed any competent guide could do the same with enough attempts. Mr. Whitman offered a bet. If Sabrina and I broke the full combat record on maximum difficulty, Ms. Voltage would owe me any one favor she could legally perform. I accepted before she finished the sentence. Ms. Voltage asked whether I even understood what maximum difficulty meant. The mode removed safety limits, allowed monsters to cause lethal wounds, and ended only when both trainees quit or the final creature died. And that suited me, because real danger meant real power. Bianca heard about the bet while sitting in a recovery bath after forcing more of the gray demon's strength into her body. She had been exhausted enough to ignore a faculty summons. Then her aide mentioned Sabrina was alone with me in a combat chamber, and Bianca stood up before the sentence ended. Jealousy got her moving faster than the recovery spell had managed all morning. Back in the trial hall, Sabrina objected when I selected slaughter mode. She had agreed to test our teamwork, not help me speedrun a funeral. I reminded her that she wanted to know whether the punch was real. Then I locked the choice before she could reach the control panel. The doors sealed as the first creature came through the wall instead of the gate, claws aimed at my spine, and my emergency talent finally activated. This time, Sabrina saw the entire change. I caught the creature by the throat, turned with its momentum, and threw it through 2 others. Sabrina cut the wounded pair before they landed. A pack rushed from the left, so I drew them across a pressure plate and let the dungeon's own blades tear through their formation. The next wave came from above, so Sabrina stepped onto my shoulder, launched over them, and cut both wings while I broke the bodies on the way down. Outside the chamber, Mr. Whitman leaned closer to the viewing crystal. Ms. Voltage stopped complaining and started recalculating what favor I might request. The attendant who had mocked me quietly removed my F-rank badge from the betting board because nobody was laughing anymore. Before the final chamber opened, the dungeon tried to split us. A false exit appeared behind Sabrina, while a swarm poured through the real passage beside me. She had 1 second to choose between the safe door and my call. I shouted that the bright doorway was a trap. Sabrina trusted me, turned away from safety, and cut through the swarm instead. The false exit closed on steel spikes. Ms. Voltage saw that from the control room and stopped arguing that I was merely lucky, while Mr. Whitman watched Sabrina's decision instead of celebrating because command ability meant nothing unless strong people chose to follow it under pressure. Sabrina reached me with a cut across her sleeve and asked how many more surprises I had memorized. I told her enough to make the refund policy complicated. She laughed once, then the giant's footsteps shook dust from the ceiling. The final creature was a stone giant with a core protected behind 3 moving plates. It expected Sabrina to lead because she was the recognized hero candidate. So I let it track her sword, stepped into its blind side, and used the partial Ellery technique to split the first plate. Sabrina understood without a speech. She cut the second, rolled under the counterattack, and shouted for me to finish. The giant swung hard enough to kill me, and my power peaked before the weapon reached my head. I drove the wooden trial blade through the last plate, punched the exposed core, and Sabrina's strike landed through my opening. The creature came apart around us, the record board flashed, and the entire control room erupted. Mr. Whitman won his bet. Miss Voltage looked personally betrayed by mathematics. Sabrina stood in the falling dust, breathing hard, and reached for my hand. She asked whether we could stop pretending our connection was only curiosity. She wanted to become real friends, train together, and learn why I kept choosing danger with a smile that annoyed her. I took her hand, the relationship threshold crossed, and my system granted another reward while her expression softened enough to make me forget the warning siren for half a second. Bianca entered the chamber before we let go. She looked at our joined hands, the destroyed giant, and Sabrina's face. Then Bianca asked whether I liked Sabrina. My emergency danger sense flickered. You need to understand how absurd that was. A woman had just watched me survive slaughter mode, and the most lethal question in the room was about my dating preferences. I told Bianca I had missed her while training with Sabrina. That answer hit exactly where it needed to. Bianca's killing pressure eased, Sabrina's grip tightened out of irritation, and Ms. Voltage slowly backed out of the chamber because she had no interest in refereeing whatever this was. Bianca handed me a sealed letter. Inside, she asked me to attend the freshman reception as her pretend partner. The request was written politely. The system warning attached to rejection was not. I looked up at Bianca's perfect composure while Sabrina kept holding my hand and tried to read the letter upside down. The academy trial had given me a storage reward, a magical favor, and a friendship with the heroine. Its immediate consequence was a fake date with the future final boss. I thought the reception would be a simple jealousy problem. By midnight, that fake relationship would become the worst rescue mission of my first month. Sabrina solved Bianca's fake date letter by arriving at my room the next morning with one of her own. She had dressed for the reception instead of training, which meant the heroic uniform was gone and a dark blue evening dress had taken its place. I noticed because I am only human, and that dress had clearly been designed by an enemy of concentration. Sabrina held out the envelope and asked whether I already had plans. I started to answer that I had received another invitation, caught the word halfway out, and converted it into a cough so violent she offered water. The system gave me two clean options: reject Bianca and trigger dangerous resentment, or reject Sabrina and damage the trust I had just earned. So, I chose the dirty third option and accepted both invitations. Now tell me, what would you have done? Reject the future final boss, or the heroine who could kick me through a wall? I had survived assassins, cursed swords, and a stone giant, yet one honest answer had me accepting 2 dates and funding a counterfeit version of myself. The reception began that evening in the academy's main hall. I spent every relationship point I had on a cheap walking and talking clone. It could copy my face, follow simple instructions, and remain solid until it took serious damage. It couldn't improvise well, use my powers, or survive anyone comparing as closely. So, the real me escorted Bianca through the front entrance while the clone met Sabrina near the garden doors. Neither woman could see both versions, and the clone had to stay far enough away that Bianca's instincts didn't notice something wrong. That rule survived for about 10 minutes. Bianca wore a fitted black dress under her student council coat, and the entire line at the entrance became quieter when she arrived. She took my arm as if we had done this for years. I tried to keep my eyes on the guest list, but she caught the glance I aimed at her dress and asked whether I approved. I told her the dress had made a strong opening argument, and Bianca's mouth curved before she answered. Then keep listening. Meanwhile, Clone Me was walking beside Sabrina with the emotional range of a coat rack. Sabrina asked whether she looked different. The clone replied that her combat readiness appeared unchanged. She stared at him, decided I was nervous, and found the answer weirdly charming. Even my bargain bin duplicate was accidentally winning. The scheme nearly died 10 minutes later when Sabrina decided to show Clone Me the main ballroom. At the same time, Bianca pulled the real me toward the same balcony because she wanted privacy. I saw Sabrina's blue dress through the glass and dragged Bianca toward the food tables with enough urgency to make her think I was starving. Clone Me received the avoidance order half a second late. It turned too sharply, walked into a waiter, and caught an entire tray before it hit the floor. Sabrina applauded while Bianca heard her, glanced toward the balcony, and asked whether somebody familiar was there. I handed her a plate of roasted boar and claimed the smell had distracted me. That lie created the greasy food tactic, which means one near discovery accidentally wrote the next romantic misunderstanding for me. My plans were beginning to reproduce without supervision. Then the system triggered a pheromone effect I had bought without reading the fine print. My scent became unusually attractive to anyone already interested in me, and Bianca leaned closer before she could stop herself. She told me I seemed more masculine tonight, then looked annoyed at her own honesty. I was trying to lower her affection before the future demon awakening. Instead, the system had turned me into a walking bad decision. My first sabotage tactic was food. I ordered the greasiest roasted boar on the menu, ate it with zero elegance, and pretended I hated formal dining. Bianca tasted one bite and admitted she loved it because her family dinners had always been stiff political performances. She finally relaxed. But the plan failed because Bianca relaxed and leaned closer. My second tactic was a terrible gift. I noticed a loose button on her cuff, removed the matching spare from my own uniform, and offered it with no wrapping. Bianca looked at the button, then at me, and decided I had been paying attention to tiny details about her clothing. She closed her fingers around it like I had handed her a family jewel. I had attempted cheapness and produced intimacy. Honestly, the reverse mastermind system deserved its own office. Bianca asked why I had been studying divine theory. She already knew about the ash on my sleeve and had connected it to the sealed battlefield. I could have lied again, but the party was loud. Her hand was still around that stupid button, and I needed her to trust me before the cult attacked. So I told her the truth that didn't expose my isekai identity. The demon in her bloodline would eventually take more control. 2 high-level angelic blessings might suppress it. I had been chasing those blessings because I intended to keep her alive. For once, I said the rest without a joke. Bianca had grown up believing everyone near her either feared the demon or wanted to use it. My promise hit the one place she kept armored. She asked whether I understood what protecting her could cost. I told her I had already started paying. Across the hall, Sabrina saw the real me leaning close to Bianca and assumed her quiet date had been part of some humiliating game. Clone me responded to her rising anger by walking away because I had ordered it to avoid confrontation. That made Sabrina more suspicious, so she followed him through a service door into the basement. The clone found the sabotaged monster cages first. Several locks had been loosened, a timing crystal flashed beside the feed room, and the largest containment gate stood one vibration away from failure. Sabrina recognized the danger and reached for the crystal. The bomb detonated, and Clone Me threw itself over her before Sabrina could move. Fire filled the corridor, the duplicate's back burned away, and Sabrina believed I had taken the blast with my real body. Her fear hardened into furious attachment when the clone dissolved in her arms. That created a new problem because Sabrina now knew there had been 2 of me. The blast released every creature in the lower cages. Upstairs, music stopped under the sound of stone breaking. Students pushed toward the exits, but the security doors sealed to keep monsters from reaching the city. The system issued a rescue mission: save as many students as possible before the strongest beast reached the first floor. I left Bianca in the middle of the date, but she caught my sleeve and asked whether this was another secret. I told her the cages had failed and Sabrina was below. Bianca released me immediately, though jealousy and fear fought across her face. I dispelled the remaining clone, which transferred its last sensory memory. Sabrina had survived, and the largest monster was already climbing. When I reached the main stairwell, Sabrina grabbed my coat, checked my face, and demanded an explanation about the duplicate. I told her she could yell after we stopped the massacre. She wanted to hit me and hug me at the same time, so she settled for dragging me toward the first floor. The giant beast arrived before us. It smashed through the stairwell, scattered the remaining guards, and trapped hundreds of students behind a failing sacred barrier. The campus priests had been diverted, the instructors were fighting smaller creatures below, and the trainee maintaining the shield had no mana left. A senior official ordered everyone to wait for rescue even though the barrier had less than a minute. He had already accepted that the students nearest the front would die first, because sacrificing a few sounded cleaner than admitting he had no plan. I stepped past him, and he grabbed my shoulder before calling me an F-rank fraud. I removed his hand, pointed at the cracking barrier, and asked whether his title could stop teeth. He had no answer, which was fine because I didn't need one. The beast struck again, and the barrier split. Real killing pressure activated my emergency talent. I converted the surge into defense, raised both hands, and used the sacred shield the angel commander had placed in the burner. White light expanded from my palms and replaced the failing barrier a heartbeat before the beast reached the students. And the impact drove me backward across the floor, tore my shoes, and sent blood from my nose, but the shield held while every point of mana vanished. The beast struck again before my lungs recovered. Cracks spread across the white barrier, and the students nearest me started pushing mana into it even though none of them knew the technique. Their power was too weak to reinforce the spell directly, but the act changed the crowd. Students stopped screaming, lifted the injured, cleared the doors, and shoved aside the senior official who had ordered everyone to wait. A first-year priest dropped beside me and copied my stance, giving the crowd a visible place to focus their fear. Sabrina took command of the evacuation lane without asking permission. Bianca saw both reactions and understood that my shield had done more than block one monster. It had made hundreds of people stop waiting to die. The beast raised both claws. I had enough converted defense for one more impact, and everyone behind me knew it from the way the light thinned. That prediction made Bianca's decision hit harder when she stepped through. The official who had called me a fraud stopped speaking. A priest behind him recognized the technique and asked how an F-rank student was performing a sacred barrier that usually took years to master. Students nearest the barrier stared from the holy light to my F-rank badge, while the people behind them kept moving the injured through the cleared doors. Sabrina understood the cost first. She saw my arms shaking and realized the defense was burning through the same power that had launched her through the arena wall. Then she looked at Bianca, who had just reached the stairwell, and told her I had chosen this position because the monster's route would have hit Bianca's side of the hall. Bianca heard the promise from our date inside that explanation. Her fear sharpened into fury. She stepped through my barrier, drew her sword, and attacked the beast alone. The monster expected the student council president to retreat after one exchange. Bianca cut through its front leg, used the recoil to climb its body, and drove her blade into the skull with the true Ellery family style. The creature crashed into the floor, the hall erupted, and for one glorious second I thought the mission had ended. The one-charge movement charm from the hidden cache was still in my coat. Then the corpse moved. A burning limb unfolded from beneath the warped body and struck at Bianca's back while she was too exhausted to turn. I burned the charm's only jump. The world snapped, I appeared between them, and the creature's claw hit me instead. Bianca saw my body leave the floor while Sabrina screamed my name, and the cheering crowd went silent because the barrier vanished with me. The wounded students finally understood the F-rank fraud had spent everything keeping them alive. Bianca finished the beast with a second strike so violent the floor split under it. Then she caught me before I landed, pressed both hands against the wound, and ordered me to stay awake with the same authority she used to command the entire council. I tried to tell her our fake date had become expensive, but Bianca ordered me to shut up, and her voice cracked on the last word. I had joked about the clone and the greasy boar, with her hands shaking in my blood. The next joke never came. 2 days later, I woke in the recovery wing with Director Marshall sitting beside the bed. Bianca was alive, Sabrina had refused to leave the hallway, and the reception casualty count was far lower because I had held the barrier. Director Marshall confirmed the monster cages had been sabotaged by someone with Academy access. She also told me I had attracted more attention in 1 month than any student she had watched in decades. I asked whether that was praise. She smiled before answering, "It is a warning, Logan." Director Marshall's warning became specific before I left the recovery wing. 3 major factions around the sealed battlefield were competing for exceptional students, and my public barrier had moved me from possible fraud to valuable target. Recruitment was the polite option, kidnapping was the efficient one. She showed me the black seal recovered from the assassins and the monster cages. Both attacks traced back to the same demon cult, a group using charity fronts and academy insiders to create mass casualties near the barrier. The cult wanted the fear, death, and panic because those things fed demon fragments. Then, Director Marshall handed me an interdimensional key. The key could open short routes into hostile regions beyond the barrier. She claimed Bianca, Sabrina, and I would all be needed to prevent a future collapse, but she refused to explain the full plan because her oldest records contained missing pages. Her knowledge came from centuries of archived prophecies, which was reassuring in the way a locked basement is reassuring. I pocketed the key anyway. If a suspicious immortal gives you access to other dimensions, you ask questions after checking whether it fits in your coat. Director Marshall warned that the factions would begin with recruitment because civilized people preferred kidnapping only after rejection. Bianca arrived during that sentence, heard the word kidnapped, and planted herself beside my bed like an armed veto. Sabrina came in a minute later with food, saw Bianca claiming guard duty, and placed the tray between us with enough force to threaten the soup. My kidnapping problem had acquired jealous security guards, and neither woman had been formally hired. My class placement remained unresolved, so Mr. Whitman assigned me to advanced lessons beside Bianca and Sabrina. That arrangement solved nothing and made every lunch table around us more interesting. Bianca wanted to study my family sword imprint. Sabrina wanted to prove her own style was better. I wanted both women to stop using my personal space as a tournament bracket. The first lesson became a theory argument before Mr. Whitman finished attendance, so take one guess how long it stayed academic. Bianca claimed disciplined form beat raw improvisation. Sabrina argued that real opponents didn't respect diagrams. Each woman demonstrated by attacking a training dummy, then accused the other of choosing an easier angle. They asked me to judge. Mr. Whitman tried to rescue the lesson by ordering each woman to teach me one movement. Bianca stood behind me, adjusted my shoulders with cold precision, and told me to stop fighting the stance. Sabrina watched her hands linger, walked over, and corrected my hips even though the position was already right. Bianca asked whether Sabrina's method required so much touching. Sabrina replied that competent teaching required feedback. Bianca said competence usually produced students who remained inside the building. The class remembered the arena wall and failed to hide its laughter. Sabrina's next demonstration split every target in the row. I copied Bianca's footwork, used Sabrina's breathing rhythm, and broke a reinforced dummy with an F-rank body that shouldn't have dented it. The skeptic nearest the front asked to see my badge again, and by the time Mr. Whitman moved me into the advanced rotation, the senior trainee who had challenged my placement had already backed off. The rivalry had produced a status reward before either woman noticed they had cooperated. I told them Bianca's control was cleaner and Sabrina's impact was harder. Both heard the half they liked, both disliked the half given to the other, and the rivalry increased their relationship profiles. The system rewarded me with deeper access to Bianca's family technique and an endurance breathing method from Sabrina. Then it unlocked a darker feature. The coercion mark built pressure on decent people until I could force one request, and the system paid more for bending them than for attracting villains. Whoever built that feature was a creep with a scoreboard. Mr. Whitman saved me from staring at it any longer by announcing a forest survival test, bring back something he valued before sunset, and the best result earned first place. Students could form groups, steal from rivals, or withdraw, while serious injury meant immediate failure. Sabrina asked me to join her established hero team. In the original route, those people needed to learn how to fight together without me, so I refused. She heard the answer as another rejection and walked away before I could soften it. Rex Malloy, the Academy's second-ranked male fighter, had been waiting for exactly that opening. Rex was strong, wealthy, painfully proud, and convinced Sabrina's attention belonged to him. He called me a fraud who had tricked 2 women above my station, then announced that an F-rank country boy had no right to stand beside the heroine. His deepest wound was obvious. Sabrina had never looked at him the way she looked at me, so I asked whether he wanted a test score bet or permission to keep whining. Rex raised the wager until whoever placed lower had to acknowledge the winner publicly and stay away from Sabrina unless invited. The coercion mark appeared because his jealousy had pushed a decent rival toward genuine cruelty. Bianca was serving as a grader. Before I entered the forest, she wrote the highest score beside my name and asked Mr. Whitman for permission to monitor me personally. Mr. Whitman looked at the blank results sheet, then at Sabrina disappearing between the trees, and understood that Bianca's definition of academic integrity had become romantic border control. He denied the request, and Bianca followed anyway. Meanwhile, Sabrina vented to Chloe Harper, the priestess in her hero team, and the person who understood her emotions before she did. Sabrina admitted my distance hurt. Chloe decided I was protecting Sabrina's reputation until I became strong enough to stand beside her publicly. That interpretation had no relationship with reality, but it transformed Sabrina's anger into hope. This is what I mean about reverse mastermind. I could reject a woman for plot preservation, and her best friend would upgrade it into sacrifice. Inside the forest, I found the rare mineral cluster Mr. Whitman had hidden near a cliff. Rex found me before I could leave. He lowered his spear and demanded I surrender half, claiming that would be generous. I offered him a 50-50 split. I kept the minerals and he kept the lesson. Rex answered by attacking. His first thrust was meant to pin my coat, but rage pushed it close enough to my chest that my danger boost stirred. I stepped onto the spear shaft, kicked his shoulder, and ran. He chased because losing the minerals would hurt his rank, but losing me would hurt his pride. I kept him angry without letting the fight end. Each lethal swing fed my temporary power and the coercion mark. I baited him around a thick tree, waited for the full force thrust, then struck the trunk with my boosted fist. The tree fell between us, taking his spear point in half the path. Rex climbed over it, still talking. My guy had been offered several exits and treated everyone like a personal insult. He threw the broken spear shaft like a javelin. I ducked, and it pinned my mineral bag to another tree. Rex thought he had finally forced me to fight for the prize, so he announced the surrender terms loudly enough for nearby teams to hear. He wanted witnesses because public victory over me would repair the humiliation Sabrina had caused by choosing my company. I let him reach the bag, then I struck the ground beside his front foot, opening the mud pocket the exam designers had hidden under the roots. Rex sank to one knee, pulled free, and sank again when his other boot followed. A nearby team stopped to watch the Academy's second-ranked fighter lose an argument with wet dirt, but the scene would have stayed comic if Rex had accepted it. Instead, he ripped off one boot, abandoned the mineral bag, and came at my head with the broken shaft. That choice turned embarrassment into real danger and activated the power he had spent all day calling fake, just as Sabrina arrived. She saw Rex attacking the man she considered her friend, cut his spear in half, swept his legs, and placed her sword at his throat before he hit the ground. Rex tried to explain the bet. Sabrina informed him that using her name to threaten someone had already lost him permission to speak for her. 3 teams watched Sabrina stand over Rex for me instead of protecting him, and Rex finally understood my arena punch had been real because I had spent the chase farming his killing intent. He dropped to one knee before she moved the sword. Rex promised he would never approach me again without permission. I told him standing would be a strong first step. He remained on one knee, which was how Rex Malloy became the kneeling fighter and turned one apology into a recurring problem. I returned with the rare minerals and placed first. Bianca's pre-written score became accidentally accurate, which she took as proof of judgment instead of evidence of corruption. Sabrina congratulated me, still embarrassed by how fiercely she had defended me. Chloe pulled me aside afterward. She ordered me to treat Sabrina better, then warned me not to get too close because Sabrina became reckless around men she cared about. So I received the cleanest mixed message in Academy history. Care for Sabrina. Keep the romance dial low, protect her quietly, and please stop making her punch architecture. The forest reward gave me access to the vision storage room. Miss Voltage also owed me one magical favor from the dungeon bet. I combined those assets with the interdimensional key and asked her to build a cannon powerful enough to destroy the coming chapter boss. Ms. Voltage stared at the design, then at me, and asked whether I was planning to save the academy or relocate it through recoil. I told her the target would be outside. She called the request insane, so I placed Mr. Whitman's signed wager on her table. Ms. Voltage called the wager unfair until I reminded her she had written it, then accused me of collecting women, favors, and military hardware in the same month. She snapped that this wasn't a defense, and I told her I had never offered one. She tried to reduce the request by proposing a smaller weapon, then a portable launcher, then a ceremonial blast that would frighten the boss without removing him. I rejected each version because the cult leader behind the attacks could regenerate from anything short of total destruction. Ms. Voltage finally understood I needed one shot that left nothing available to heal. She pulled the workshop shutters closed and made me repeat where the cannon would be aimed. I marked the plaza outside the sealed barrier, the same route the cult leader would use if he followed the chapter plan. That prediction gave her a place to anchor the platform, but it also told her I expected a cult attack before the festival. Ms. Voltage wanted the source of my information. I offered the only payment I could afford. If the prediction failed, she could dismantle the cannon and publicly call me an idiot. If it succeeded, she would fire when I gave the signal, even if every official told her to wait. The signed wager trapped her, and the reception had shown her what waiting cost, so she agreed on 3 conditions: dimensional ectoplasm, a stable core, and a firing location where the recoil wouldn't kill students. I collected the storage reward, marked the remaining materials, and carried the mineral cluster to her workshop. The finished blueprint covered an entire wall. Miss Voltage tapped the estimated blast radius and informed me that one bad angle could erase half the academy. For once, my plan to solve a problem with excessive force was proceeding exactly as intended. Could I finish the cannon before the cult made its next move? That part still depended on 3 materials and 1 enemy staying predictable. Malcolm Creed, the charity crook, approached me outside Ms. Voltage's workshop while the cannon blueprint was still warm. He fed refugees in public, dressed like a generous old noble, and spoke with the soft patience of a man who expected gratitude before offering anything. In the game, he was the demon cult's chapter boss. Malcolm praised my reception rescue, asked whether the academy appreciated my talent, and invited me to dinner at a private restaurant used by major families. He was supposed to approach Sabrina. My interference had shifted the route, so he had chosen me instead. The system gave the same brutal warning attached to major story events: accept the route or suffer a lethal penalty when the story corrected itself. I had already watched the route punish every attempt to dodge it, so I accepted, and Malcolm expected gratitude. When I accepted without asking what he could offer, he changed tactics and implied the academy had been using me. He mentioned my withheld class placement, the dangerous missions, and the fact that Director Marshall hadn't publicly defended me after the reception. Every point was selected to isolate me from the academy while making Malcolm sound helpful. Listen to that pitch, and the trap is obvious, because he delivered every threat as a favor. I thanked him for the concern and asked why his charity emblem had appeared on men who attacked students. The question landed softly, but his thumb stopped moving over the head of his cane. Malcolm denied knowing anything, then praised my caution. Inside, he decided the dinner could no longer remain a simple recruitment. He would test whether I knew the whole plan and kill me if the answer threatened him. Then Malcolm leaned close and used Sabrina's name, though I had never introduced her. So how did the charity crook know which woman stood nearest me? Public reports gave him the name. The timing told me his people were tracking her. Dinner became the fastest way to pull his eyes off her. Taking Sabrina's place also kept Malcolm away from her and let me choose the battlefield. I invited Bianca to the same restaurant and told her it was a private dinner. She stared at the invitation, recognized the place as romantic, and asked whether I understood what kind of venue I had selected. I told her I had seen the menu. Bianca wanted to hear the other answer, but she agreed before I supplied it. Before the dinner, I needed the cannon material and the spirit item from Director Marshall. That meant bringing Sabrina into the interdimensional region, because the area contained predators strong enough to eat me before my key reopened. I found her in the training yard with a box of apology cookies. Sabrina's anger from the forest had cooled into hurt. When she was younger, her older brother Felix had promised to become her guardian, teased her for worrying, and left for war anyway. Their parents died during the same conflict. Felix ordered Sabrina to run while he stayed behind, and she had spent every year since trying to deserve the hero title he never returned to see. My repeated distance kept pressing that wound, so I apologized without making it pretty. I told Sabrina we were close, I had handled it badly, and I needed her for something dangerous. She took one cookie, made me repeat the part where I needed her, and accepted before finishing it. While we prepared, Bianca's student council aide brought her 2 early arrival notices. Roxy Slate, the exiled daughter of a tribal leader and a fight addict with the manners of a charging bull, was coming several chapters too soon. The second notice named Evelyn Drake, a saint from the Holy Empire, and Daphne's older sister, who was arriving during the same week. Bianca saw the timing and suspected coordination. She was right about the danger, wrong about the cause, and too jealous about my dinner invitation to enjoy either realization. Sabrina and I reached the portal chamber that afternoon. The key could hold a route for only a few minutes, and the safest entry method was a launch platform that threw travelers through before the opening destabilized. You would have questioned the word safest too. Sabrina saw the catapult arm and asked whether an enemy had translated it. I tightened the straps, and the platform fired. We shot through blue light into a weightless region full of floating ruins. The violent launch brought back Felix's old advice about moving first when fear wanted you frozen. Sabrina remembered the day her brother pushed her toward safety while their home burned, and for several seconds she stopped speaking. I kept every joke to myself, touched her wrist, and held us steady until the memory released her. Then the interdimensional beast opened its mouth beneath us. I had come for ectoplasm from a ruined zone whose old name no longer mattered to anyone alive. The material clung to dead structures, and Miss Voltage needed a full container. Sabrina cut through smaller creatures while I scraped the glowing residue into the key case. Sabrina and I crossed one field of broken gravity where every movement pushed us backward. I told her to strike behind herself to move forward, and she called the method ridiculous right before it launched her past me to catch the drifting ectoplasm. A parasite attached itself to my sleeve. Sabrina cut it off and demanded to know whether anything in that region didn't consider me lunch. I told her the angels preferred baked goods, which got one laugh before the next burning ruin hit the same wound as her childhood home. This time she took my hand first and crossed while scared instead of freezing. And the large predator followed the route exactly as I remembered. It couldn't see through the floating ruins, but it tracked magical movement. So I let it close until its jaws surrounded us, waited for the key's return pulse, and activated the exit inside its mouth. Sabrina and I exploded back into the academy portal chamber covered in slime. She stared at me for a full second, then hit me with the empty container because I had neglected to mention the part where the monster almost swallowed us. Her anger increased her profile again. Even furious, she stayed close enough to check whether the teeth had reached my back. I told her the slime matched the dress, so she raised the container a second time, and I had earned that swing. Director Marshall verified the ectoplasm by touching one drop and making the entire mass scream. She asked why I wanted more strength after surviving every crisis so far. I told her surviving was becoming more expensive, and the women around me were becoming more dangerous faster than the game had predicted. She admitted she kept helping partly because she found me cute, which was either flirting or psychological warfare. With Director Marshall, those were often the same department. I traded the ectoplasm for a psychic item containing the consciousness of a powerful dead warrior. The spirit would remain asleep until I supplied enough sacred energy. I knew the identity inside because the original game had hidden him in this route, but Sabrina only saw a dark glove and a director refusing to explain it. Bianca had spent 20 minutes deciding whether the outfit looked too deliberate, then another 10 pretending she had chosen it without thought. Her aide knew better and sent her out before she changed a fourth time. When Bianca saw me waiting, she scanned my face for disappointment, found admiration instead, and relaxed enough to take my arm. I told her she looked dangerous in a way the restaurant's insurance had probably excluded. Bianca answered that the evening would remain peaceful if I behaved. The warning came with a small smile, which meant my definition of behave had already become part of the flirt. At the restaurant entrance, a manager tried to move us behind a wealthier family. Bianca showed her student council seal, and the man apologized before the light stopped glowing. She asked that the delayed students be seated first, then kept hold of my hand as the staff opened every door and started bowing. Rex, the kneeling fighter from the forest, was working a temporary shift inside after losing part of his allowance. He saw me holding Bianca's hand, started to kneel out of habit, remembered the trays, and converted the movement into a deeply suspicious bow. Around his neck hung a silver emblem from Malcolm's charity. I recognized it as a control device and ordered Rex to remove it. He joked about me being jealous of his jewelry, then saw my face, pulled the chain free, and watched the symbol burn his palm. His embarrassment disappeared. He started stripping the matching emblems from nearby staff. The charity crook separated me from Bianca under the excuse of private business. Malcolm expected his hired men to contain her in the adjoining room. Then he offered me status, protection, and a place inside his charity, speaking as though he were rescuing a country nobody from an ungrateful school. I let Malcolm finish, and he spent that permission lavishly. He claimed Bianca's demon blood made her a danger to ordinary people, argued that Sabrina's heroic reputation would be destroyed if she stayed close to me, and promised his charity could protect both women if I signed one quiet agreement. He even placed a gold membership seal on the table, the kind of status object designed to make poor nobles feel chosen. I turned the seal over and found the same control pattern Rex wore around his neck. Malcolm saw me recognize it and stopped pretending the offer was voluntary. His guards closed the inner door. He told me I had confused unusual luck with real power and that Bianca would learn obedience after watching me disappear. The waiter pouring wine heard every word. His hand shook because his younger sister had attended the reception. Malcolm noticed and ordered him out, but the man left the bottle and carried the threat into the hall. By the time Bianca kicked through the adjoining room, every surviving staff member already knew which generous charity leader had planned the massacre. Then, I told him the entire plan. His cult had sabotaged the reception to test the barrier response. During the next festival, his people would exploit the weakened security, kill enough civilians to generate demonic energy, and force the gray fragment inside Bianca to awaken. Malcolm had invited me because he wanted to either recruit the unpredictable variable or remove it before the massacre. His polite smile held for 3 sentences too long. The man kept asking how I knew, which confirmed every point for the guards listening outside. He tried to recover by claiming Bianca was already captured. The adjoining door flew inward. Bianca stepped through over the bodies of Malcolm's men. Her dress had one cut at the shoulder, her sword was red, and she looked more relaxed than she had during dinner. She informed Malcolm that the exercise had refreshed her, then asked whether we could continue our date somewhere with better security. Malcolm's guards had expected a sheltered noblewoman. The surviving pair backed into the wall because they had just learned Bianca was the security problem. Her profile crossed into real trust, and the system paid me again while Malcolm watched the relationship he planned to corrupt become stronger in front of him. His composure finally cracked. Bianca took my arm, made me agree that I owed her a replacement dinner, and added that Sabrina wasn't invited. From the floor, Rex crawled under tables and removed the rest of the charity emblems from the staff he had been bossing around 10 minutes earlier. Malcolm had lost his men, his recruitment pitch, and his dignity. Behind us, he pulled a black vial from his coat and chose the one response his ego still liked: make the whole district pay for embarrassing him. Malcolm swallowed a vial of demon essence before Bianca and I reached the restaurant stairs. His body split through the tailored suit, black horns tore from his skull, and the floor exploded under the pressure. The blast ripped open the dining room, threw guests into the street, woke cultists hidden across the district through the same control emblems Rex had been removing, and officially cancelled dessert. The transformed Malcolm was stronger than the chapter boss I remembered because I had forced him to use the essence early. His humiliation had changed the route, and now every bad decision he made came with extra muscle. So how were we supposed to stop a demon whose embarrassment had upgraded him? Look at his first move after transforming. Malcolm's roar sent glass through the lobby and dropped 2 cultists who had expected to control him. Then he grabbed one follower, drained the man's emblem, and grew larger while the others backed away. The charity crook had spent years promising his people a place in the new world. The moment he needed fuel, he used them like batteries. That betrayal changed the street. Several controlled guards fought the emblems long enough for Rex to tear them free. A mother who had praised Malcolm's charity saw him throw one of his own men through a carriage and dragged her children behind Bianca instead. Every witness who switched sides reduced the panic feeding him, so Malcolm started attacking the crowd simply to force fear back into the plaza. I had pulled him away from Sabrina, and the price was an entire district trapped inside his tantrum. Rex, the kneeling fighter turned emergency waiter, crawled from the wreckage holding the burned emblem. He finally understood the charity necklace had been designed to control him during the festival. I ordered him to gather the unaffected staff, cut every remaining chain, and move civilians away from the sealed battlefield. Rex obeyed without arguing and saluted with a serving tray because his sword was buried under a collapsed table. I told Bianca Malcolm would attack the Great Barrier next. The cult needed mass panic near the seal, and the shortest route ran through the Eastern District. She trusted the prediction because I had just recited his plan to his face, so we moved before the demon finished roaring for an audience. Malcolm caught us at the Barrier Plaza. He mocked Bianca for following an F-rank student and promised to tear me apart first so she could watch. Bianca replied that he had already failed to control one dinner reservation, so world domination felt ambitious. She glanced at me after the insult, waiting for approval, and I gave her a quick nod before Malcolm attacked. The fight's rule was brutal. If Malcolm touched the barrier core 3 times, the seal would crack. Track the count with me, because every block had a number attached to it. We couldn't simply survive. We had to keep a demon many times stronger than us away from one fixed point while the district emptied behind us. Bianca attacked first, but Malcolm expected her family style and met the opening cut with an armored forearm before countering toward her ribs. I stepped between them, raised the sacred shield, and absorbed enough force to leave both feet numb. Bianca used my barrier as a platform and cut across his neck, but the wound closed while Malcolm laughed, charged the core, and forced me to burn more mana. My defense conversion gave me 20 seconds at a time, but each use emptied the power my emergency talent created. Bianca understood the rhythm and timed her attacks around my weak intervals. We were fighting as a protector pair now. I took the impossible angles, she punished the openings. On the second collision, my sacred shield cracked. Bianca removed her family's vitality necklace and fastened it around my neck while Malcolm recovered. That necklace had saved me on the train. Giving it away weakened her protection, but she had decided it was her turn to stand between me and death. I told her this was becoming a very expensive date. Bianca tightened the clasp and answered, "Then stop wasting my gifts." Malcolm heard enough to realize the relationship he had tried to weaponize was feeding our coordination. He doubled down because the man couldn't lose quietly if his life depended on it. He grew 2 extra arms, drove them into the plaza, and launched a wave of demonic spikes toward the barrier. I blocked the center while Bianca cut the sides. Rex's evacuees saw the entire exchange from the far street, and one former charity guard ripped off his emblem after watching Malcolm target civilians. The desertion spread until men who had joined for money started pulling families out instead of feeding the attack, and Malcolm saw his own guards choosing civilians over him. Bianca drove him away from the core and, in the middle of lethal combat, asked whether we looked like a good couple. Even Malcolm paused, and I almost missed my next block before Bianca repeated the question with her sword at his throat. The man wanted to insult her, but the truth was visible. We had turned his strongest form into a 2-person training exercise. So he admitted, we fought well together. Bianca smiled and let the gray fragments surge. Her sword style changed, every movement became sharper, and a possessed combination cut Malcolm across the chest hard enough to bury him in the plaza wall. Bianca landed beside me with a look that said she had just won an argument nobody else knew we were having. Then lightning came out of Malcolm's broken body. The strike crossed the plaza before I could raise the shield. It punched through my chest, lifted me off the ground, and threw me against the barrier steps. For one silent instant, I couldn't breathe. Bianca saw the wound and believed I was dead. Bianca's sword slipped from her hand as color drained from the world and sound vanished. The gray demon fragment rose through her body, wearing her face with an older, colder expression. It froze Malcolm, the plaza, and every living person except me. This was the strongest evil entity in the game. My attraction talent reached it before fear did. The demon walked to me with open fascination. It touched the hole in my chest, cut my skin with one nail, and placed a dark mark over my heart. Blood returned to my body, torn muscle closed, and the fatal damage rewound as if the strike had never landed. The system message broke into unreadable symbols before I could inspect the full effect. The visible rule stayed clear. The gray demon had linked itself to me, suppressed part of my existing power, and left a promise that we would meet again. Then it smiled through Bianca's face and disappeared. Time resumed, and Malcolm saw me standing without remembering how to gloat. Bianca collapsed before she could see what had saved me. The one-time copy reward I had stored since the first month finally became useful. I selected the Gray Demon's anti-demon authority. Pressure crushed every bone in my body while the system copied it, but when the reward finished, I had 5 minutes of overwhelming advantage against demonic beings. I only needed the next 5. Malcolm attacked with all 4 arms. My emergency talent reached X rank again, the angelic shield covered my left side, and the demon authority burned through his regeneration on the right. He couldn't understand how one human carried sacred power and the force of the demon realm at the same time. I did not pause to teach him. I broke the first arm, cut the second with Bianca's family style, and drove him backward across the plaza. Malcolm tried to adapt by suppressing his killing intent, hoping to shut down my emergency talent the way a disciplined opponent could. The Grey Authority made that impossible. His demonic body itself counted as lethal pressure, and every step he took toward the barrier kept my strength high. He changed targets and lunged for unconscious Bianca. I crossed the distance first, caught his horn, and slammed his face into the plaza. Rex saw the move from the evacuation line and shouted that Malcolm should have accepted the dinner loss. A former cult guard repeated it. Within seconds, the villain who had entered as a district-wide terror was being heckled by the people he planned to sacrifice. By then, even you could see Malcolm's panic from the evacuation line. He tore open his own chest, exposed the regenerating core, and charged the exact blast Ms. Voltage had prepared to punish. Ms. Voltage had aimed the cannon for a target with no armor between the weapon and the core. Malcolm tried to reach the barrier core. I caught him by the throat and lifted him away from it. He promised his cult would return, promised the prophet would punish me, and promised every faction would learn my name. He was still talking when Ms. Voltage's cannon rose from the roof across the district. I had planted the weapon before dinner using the construction route and the dimensional core from the storage reward. Ms. Voltage had complained the entire time. She had also aimed it perfectly. I threw Malcolm into the marked line, and the cannon fired before he could twist away. White energy swallowed the plaza, carried Malcolm through the night sky, and erased the demon before he could finish threatening my future. The blast cracked windows 3 streets away, set off every alarm in the academy, and left a smoking trench where the cult leader had been. Rex dropped to one knee while the nearest guard removed his hat because neither man had a better reaction to the crater. Ms. Voltage's voice came through the communication crystal, demanding that everyone appreciate the engineering before Director Marshall blamed her for the crater. The mission rewarded me with a hero fragment and 5,000 points. Malcolm's chapter threat was over, and Director Marshall examined the mark on my chest after I collapsed into her lap. She refused to probe the demon link because forcing it could trigger something worse. Then she showed me one archive case. A demon vessel had once rejected her fragment after choosing a mortal partner. That single precedent was enough for Director Marshall to order me to win over the female vessels before their demons completed fusion. She pointed out that Bianca trusted me, Daphne had lowered her sword, and Sabrina had entered slaughter mode at my side. The system opened 4 dangerous profiles beside her, which was rude but persuasive. I couldn't honestly claim the mission hadn't started, I could only complain that nobody had asked the field agent. I asked whether her official plan for world salvation was romance. She told me to think of it as targeted emotional warfare. That's dating with extra casualties, I said. Director Marshall patted my hair and informed me that I had already recruited half the required field team by accident. Bianca woke 2 days later and asked about me before asking what had happened to herself. Her student council aide confirmed I had survived and had predicted Bianca would wake. That answer made Bianca calmer for 3 seconds, until she learned Evelyn Drake and her father, Arthur Ellery, were both arriving early. Elsewhere, Evelyn Drake, the chain-smoking saint and Daphne's older sister, sat across from King Caspian Mercer, the immortal boy ruler tied to the cult's next plan. Evelyn smoked beside an open window and treated him like a weapon she disliked but temporarily needed. Caspian distrusted the cult and hated demons, yet he tolerated the alliance because the prophet had promised him something he wanted more than freedom. Evelyn tolerated him for one reason: she wanted to protect Daphne, even if that meant bargaining with monsters. Back in recovery, an attendant named Owen Fisher arrived from my family's estate carrying grapes and a letter from my father. My father congratulated me on entering the academy, reminded me to stay average, and added that I should bring home a girlfriend if I happened to find one. Owen looked around the crowded recovery hall, where Sabrina was asleep in a chair and Bianca's aide had left 3 messages about dinner, then asked whether my father knew anything about my life. I folded the letter as the academy bell outside announced Arthur Ellery's arrival. Arthur Ellery's arrival should have been impossible. In the original route, Bianca's father died before her demon awakening, and that loss pushed her into the Grey Fragment's control. Now Bianca had awakened early, Arthur was alive, Roxy the fight addict and Evelyn the chain-smoking saint had arrived ahead of schedule, and every rescue I made was accelerating a different threat. I checked Bianca's messages for any sign that Arthur had spoken to her about the Grey Fragment. He hadn't contacted her, and both father and daughter were trying to protect each other with silence while I stood between them carrying stolen sword knowledge and a demon mark. So when Owen asked whether I wanted to return home before the family event, I refused and stayed for the collision I needed to understand. Owen tried to settle me into a new dorm room before the family event. Rex saw the attendant carrying my bags, assumed he was some noble bully ordering me around, and attacked without asking one question. Owen ducked by accident as Rex's sword cut a grape tray in half, and I walked in while purple fruit rolled across the floor. I explained that Owen worked for my family. Rex went pale, knelt to apologize, and offered me his sword as compensation. Owen looked from me to the kneeling fighter and decided my letters home had omitted important details, which was a fair conclusion. I accepted the sword because Bianca's family style was advancing faster than my body could support. Then I asked Bianca for a private lesson before her father noticed I knew techniques no outsider should possess, and she agreed before I finished asking. Bianca wanted the excuse to be alone with me, and you know how fast campus gossip travels. Sabrina reached the empty training hall through Chloe before the first lesson ended. Sabrina arrived carrying her own practice sword and announced that a hero candidate was obviously a better instructor than a demon family's heir. Bianca asked whether Sabrina planned to teach me by getting punched through another wall. Sabrina replied that at least her lessons produced visible results. I tried to turn the rivalry into useful instruction while Bianca demonstrated foot placement. Sabrina corrected the attack angle, and Bianca corrected Sabrina's correction. Within minutes, both women were fighting each other while I stood beside the weapon rack wondering when my lesson had become pay-per-view. Before that mistake, the 2 women managed to teach me by accident. Bianca forced me to repeat the same defensive turn until my boots wore a circle into the floor. Sabrina attacked from random angles to break the pattern. Every time I failed, Bianca adjusted 1 inch and Sabrina increased the speed. The ridiculous method worked, and I redirected 6 strikes in a row with an F-rank body and no emergency boost. Mr. Whitman, watching from the doorway, stopped treating the session as romantic nonsense and started counting. Bianca saw his approval and became more demanding. Sabrina saw Bianca become more demanding and attacked harder. By the 8th clean redirect, Sabrina had stopped swinging to embarrass Bianca and started attacking like a real opponent. Bianca stopped correcting my shoulders every breath and called the incoming angle instead. Mr. Whitman made them repeat the sequence with their roles reversed, which exposed something neither woman enjoyed admitting. Sabrina's chaos forced me to read the fight, while Bianca's precision kept me alive long enough to answer. Both claimed the result, both denied cooperating, and my reaction speed climbed while they argued over ownership. Then Sabrina tried to prove I could handle a real surprise. She feinted low, rotated high, and expected me to catch the flat of the blade. Bianca saw the angle slip half an inch toward my throat before Sabrina did. The duel stopped being playful when Sabrina's frustration pushed one strike too far. Her blade slipped past Bianca's guard and flew toward my neck. Bianca moved before I did. She crossed the hall, caught Sabrina's wrist, and drove her into the floor without drawing blood. Then Bianca demanded to know why Sabrina had endangered someone she called a friend. Sabrina stared up at her, embarrassed and furious, because the future villain had just protected me from the future hero. Mr. Whitman entered in time to see the crater, took one look at Bianca holding Sabrina down, and chose not to ask who had started it. But the real problem was Bianca's speed. She had reacted faster than her current training allowed, which meant the gray demon fusion was increasing even while visible corruption stayed low. I needed a way to measure it, and I needed more precision before the next vessel crisis. So I visited Daphne at the abandoned estate. The curse had spent the morning whispering that I would stop coming. By the time I entered, Daphne had convinced herself the biscuits were a farewell gift and attacked before I crossed the threshold. Her chained blade cut the table, the wall, and the food bag in that order. I stayed just beyond 3.5 steps. Then I placed the replacement bag on the floor and told her I had come because I wanted to see her, not because a mission had sent me. Daphne's sword stopped, but she tried to push me away by claiming everyone near her eventually died. I reminded her she had asked me to return. She said that had been weakness. I told her I liked the honest version better. The curse called her abandoned again. Daphne dropped the weapon and started crying before she could hide it. I crossed the range while the sword was still, and Daphne let me sit inside the circle everyone else feared. The curse reacted to that choice by tightening every chain around Daphne's arms. She winced but didn't retreat. I sat inside the lethal circle, opened the food bag, and asked which biscuit had survived the sword's attack. Daphne pointed to the crushed honey ones because those had been her favorite. I ate one broken piece and handed her the other. The chains loosened while we shared it, because the curse could call Daphne alone but couldn't stop someone from crossing the exact distance everyone else feared and staying while she cried. Daphne finally asked what I wanted from her. I told her I wanted her alive long enough to choose for herself, and she leaned her shoulder against mine after searching my face for a hidden price. I sat beside her until she could breathe, because somebody keeping one promise had broken through years of isolation. Her trust crossed a threshold and rewarded me with fencing focus, a skill that sharpened reactions and accuracy. Combined with Bianca's family technique, it gave me enough control to use the sword without relying on brute emergency strength. Daphne wiped her face, stole the largest biscuit, and asked whether this meant I would bring better food next time. The Academy's family visit event began the next day as a public battle royale. Students fought in a wide arena while visiting relatives watched from private platforms. Arthur Ellery, the Empire's executioner and a swordsman rumored to have cut a mountain in half, sat above Bianca with his hand resting on an ordinary cane. I entered for one reason: make him notice me before he discovered the copied technique somewhere private. Roxy's slate ruined the careful part. The fight addict arrived several chapters early, laughed at the ranked students, and knocked the first 3 opponents out with one swing. Roxy loved strong people and hated anyone who denied her a real fight. When she saw me using Bianca's defensive footwork, she crossed the arena and demanded I show everything. So you tell me, how do you beat a fight addict without giving her the fight? Her first punch cracked the platform behind me. My emergency talent activated, but her raw strength was high enough that even X-rank survival didn't guarantee a clean answer. Roxy followed with a sweep that tore up a line of stone tiles. I jumped the broken floor, blocked with Rex's sword, and felt the metal bend against her forearm. She laughed because the block proved I had hidden strength, then announced to the entire arena that she would keep me if I survived 3 minutes. Bianca rose from the family platform, and Sabrina reached for her sword in the waiting area. But Arthur only watched my feet because the defensive turn belonged to his family, and no outsider should have known the angle. Keep your eye on Arthur here. Roxy was loud, but he was the real threat. Roxy counted the first minute herself and attacked faster every time the crowd cheered. I could have continued until the emergency talent peaked, but every exchange gave Arthur more proof and gave Roxy more enjoyment. The fastest way to control both threats was to deny one of them the ending she wanted. Rex, the kneeling fighter with heroic timing and terrible durability, jumped between us and declared that Roxy would have to go through him before touching me. She punched him through 2 barriers and removed part of the arena wall with the same motion. Rex landed in the spectator section, stood up for half a second, and knelt again because his legs had reached a negotiated settlement. Roxy grinned because she expected rage, pride, or a dramatic counter from me. Instead, I blocked 1 strike with Bianca's family guard, dropped Rex's sword, and surrendered. And the arena booed, while Roxy looked personally betrayed. She had finally found someone who could survive her opening hit, and I had quit before she could enjoy the rest. Denying her the fight turned victory into frustration, and frustration became interest under my attraction talent. She grabbed my collar and demanded a rematch. I told her to schedule one through Rex. From the rubble, Rex raised a thumb because getting launched had promoted him to assistant. The students who had booed my surrender started laughing when Roxy chased me after the match instead of celebrating. Bianca understood the attraction immediately and hated it. Sabrina understood half a second later and hated it louder. Arthur ignored both women. He watched the angle of my discarded sword and decided the surrender had been tactical, so quitting had saved my body while making the one man I needed to fool even more suspicious. Arthur recognized his family's defense in my movement, appeared behind me without crossing the visible distance, and took me from the arena before Bianca could interfere. We reappeared in a private room inside the administration tower. Arthur placed his cane on the table and asked who had taught me the Ellery style. The room had no windows, 1 door, and enough cut marks on the walls to show Arthur used it for conversations that required certainty. He removed my borrowed sword and placed it beside the cane. Then he reproduced the exact defensive turn I had used against Roxy, slower than before, inviting me to correct him if I dared. I kept my mouth shut until Arthur asked whether Bianca had taught me. That question carried 2 dangers. A yes would expose the impossible speed of my learning and place Bianca under suspicion. A no would force me to name somebody else who knew a sealed family art. He pressed the cane tip against my chest, directly over the gray demon's mark, and noticed the vitality necklace Bianca had once given me. Arthur's suspicion sharpened into paternal alarm. He was no longer asking only about stolen technique. He wanted to know what kind of relationship had formed around his daughter while he was gone. So I chose the dead master lie because it protected Bianca, explained the technique, and gave Arthur a reason to test knowledge instead of blood. The lie was ugly and kept everyone alive for the next 5 minutes. I couldn't say his daughter had become emotionally attached enough for a supernatural system to copy it. That sentence had no safe ending. So I built a large lie around one piece of truth. I claimed Arthur's dead master had found me years earlier, trained me in secret, and ordered me to correct a flaw in Arthur's final technique. Arthur's expression didn't change, but the table split in front of me without his cane moving. He asked what lesson his master had left. I knew the answer from a journal Arthur wrote in the future, after decades of failing to complete the technique. The knowledge could save my life now, but using it would place me beside the strongest swordsman in the Empire with nowhere left to retreat. Arthur sat across from me, pushed the cane aside, and gave me a 2-word order: teach me. Arthur tested my claim by raising 2 fingers. Invisible cuts crossed the private room, carved the table into clean blocks, and stopped against the wall behind my head. His final technique created blades with no visible path, the kind of attack used to kill dragons before they understood combat had started. The important detail was intent. Arthur was testing, not trying to kill, so my emergency talents stayed weak. If I guessed wrong, the strongest man in the room would discover I had lied while I was already in pieces. He asked what his master had found missing. Arthur didn't give me time to invent a comfortable answer. He cut the chair behind me, then the lamp beside my shoulder, each invisible blade arriving from a different height. The pattern forced me to demonstrate whether I understood the technique or only knew one stolen stance. I watched the dust because every cut traveled straight, perfect, and dead. The future journal had described the flaw with bitter clarity. Arthur could create an invisible edge anywhere, but the edge ended where he released it. A rotating path would let the blade continue through resistance and curve around defense. So I asked him to cut the metal cup on the table without touching the wall behind it. He did, and the wall split anyway. The ruined wall proved the flaw before I explained it, and Arthur stared at the extra damage until the strongest swordsman in the Empire wanted instruction from the liar across from him. In the future journal, Arthur had described the answer after wasting half his life. The blade needed rotation through the wrist and shoulder, creating a continuous cutting path instead of a single invisible line. I explained the principle in plain terms, then used Rex's borrowed sword to demonstrate the starting motion. Arthur tried it once, and the air twisted. Every loose page in the room split at the same angle, and the far wall opened from floor to ceiling. Arthur had spent years one step from completion, and a rural F-rank student had just handed him the last inch. Arthur lowered his hand and asked what I wanted, which was how a man like him showed respect. I could have requested money, status, or immunity from future questioning. I asked him to stay alive and protect the Ellery family when the demon crisis came. That answer convinced him further. He granted me a family seal that placed me under his personal protection, one chance to call him for rescue, and a temporary guidance skill that let me share or borrow the developing power of certain dangerous people. He also accepted my promise to protect Bianca. So I entered the room as a possible thief and left with the future father-in-law package. You would think Arthur's personal protection could buy me one quiet evening. Instead, it gave Bianca and me a door worth kicking in. After Malcolm's defeat, Bianca's council found one letter tying a sacred energy professor to the sabotage. That evening, Bianca and I kicked in his office door while he burned records and ordered 2 junior assistants to pack his travel case. The professor blamed the assistants before the smoke cleared. He had ordered them to burn records as routine cleanup, then tried to hand them the crime the moment Bianca arrived. The younger woman stopped crying long enough to lock the back door, while the older one pulled out the root ledger and read the dates aloud. They weren't heroes. They were 2 people who realized their boss planned to feed them to the same fire, and that was enough to flip the room. I placed Malcolm's matching symbol beside the letter. The dates covered the sealed corridor and the reception cages, so his authority died before Bianca touched him. He tried noble sponsors, legal threats, and a promise that the council would fall with him. Arthur's seal on my coat killed the first threat, the assistants killed the second, and Bianca cut the bell cord before he could try the third. Then Bianca rested her sword against his desk and asked how many students had been inside the hall when he opened the cages. He broke and gave us the 2 remaining routes, plus the name of the veiled woman directing the cult, Vesper. Her distortion spell hid every reliable feature, but she had threatened him in person and had been planning around me before I knew she existed. The professor lunged for the letter anyway. Bianca cut him down before his hand reached it, and his last attempt to save the network cost him the arm he used. Afterward, Bianca asked what Arthur had wanted from me. I tried to minimize the interrogation, then said I needed to remain close to him because he was part of her family. Bianca caught the word family and stopped walking. I had meant her father was strategically important. She heard that I was already placing myself inside her future. Her expression softened, and I realized too late that my mouth had joined the reverse mastermind conspiracy. Back in my room, the psychic glove finally absorbed enough sacred energy to wake. A man stepped out of the dark surface as a translucent projection, looked through the wall toward the training yard, and swore when he saw Sabrina. His name was Felix Lark, Sabrina's dead older brother and a legendary guardian from the old war. Felix watched his grown sister practice the same opening strike he had taught her as a child. Pride hit him first, then grief because he couldn't let her see him yet. So how was I supposed to hide a dead older brother from the sister he died protecting when she was training 10 yards away? Revealing him would shatter her focus and expose the spirit item to the Holy Empire. Felix turned to me and asked why I had awakened him. I told him the next exam would place Sabrina, Daphne, and Evelyn inside the cult's route. I needed his team support to keep them alive. Felix saw that I had positioned him where he could watch Sabrina without exposing himself, and my first request was protection rather than power. That was enough for provisional cooperation. Then he asked whether I was dating his sister. You already know a dead older brother wasn't going to skip the relationship audit. Felix had the older brother timing of a man who could turn any emergency into an interrogation. He asked how often Sabrina visited my room, why Bianca had a vitality necklace around my neck, and whether the cursed swordswoman waiting outside counted as a separate problem. I told him the answer to all 3 was complicated. He called complicated the favorite word of men who deserve to be punched by a brother. Then he tested the glove connection by lending me a fraction of his guardian field. Warm light spread over my hands, and every active profile reacted because the spirit skill could share my temporary power with allies. The borrowed field reached through the wall and made Sabrina's practice blade flare for 1 heartbeat. She stopped, looked toward my room, and blamed another one of my secret experiments. Felix almost called out to her. The word caught in his throat, so he cut the connection before she could follow the light and turned away from the window before I saw his face. Felix saw the system effects without seeing the interface. He knew only that dangerous women kept orbiting me and that I had awakened him to protect Sabrina. Felix offered provisional cooperation and warned that it still allowed him to insult me continuously. I told Felix the situation was under review and he advised me to conduct that review from farther away. The next morning, I recruited Sabrina for the mid-year exam. She remembered my earlier rejection and made me work for the answer, asking whether I needed her power or actually wanted her beside me. This time I told her both. Chloe and the other hero candidates pushed Sabrina forward before pride could ruin the moment. Sabrina accepted, then warned that if I disappeared into another dimension without explaining the monster first, she would personally feed me to it. Felix laughed from the glove. I told him family support was becoming hostile. While we formed the team, the Holy Empire sent Evelyn Drake, the chain-smoking saint, to the academy as an early student. Director Marshall argued with an imperial projection in her office and recognized the truth beneath the ceremonial language. Evelyn was both a saintly pawn and another possible demon vessel. The Emperor wanted her close to the barrier, and Director Marshall intended to put her close to me instead. Nobody in that conversation asked Evelyn what she wanted. Daphne spent the same afternoon waiting at the abandoned estate. The curse whispered that I had forgotten her, that the destroyed biscuits had been my last gift, and that Evelyn had chosen the Empire over her. Daphne answered the voice aloud this time. She admitted being with me mattered more than food. Then I arrived carrying the cookies she had requested. Daphne tried to pretend she hadn't been waiting. The untouched chair across from her and the cleaned table exposed the lie, so I spared her the embarrassment and asked whether she would leave the estate with me for the exam. She said yes through tears. Her cursed sword immediately destroyed the cookie box. The blade did more than smash the lid. It carved the table between us and snapped toward my hand, reacting to Daphne's decision to leave isolation. The curse understood that the exam would place her around people, and people created choices it couldn't control. Daphne wrapped both chains around the sword arm and pulled until the links cut her skin. I caught the hilt from outside the lethal angle, used fencing focus to turn the edge, and pinned it against the floor. Then I loosened my grip, and Daphne kept the weapon pinned by herself. Only after she proved she could hold it did I bring out the collar. The device could limit the blade only while her will kept resisting. I showed her the control collar before fastening it. She hated the shape and asked whether Sabrina would misunderstand. I told her Sabrina could misunderstand a clear sky if Bianca was standing under it. Daphne laughed, then gave me permission. Consent first, terrible optics second. Daphne stared at the crumbs, convinced I would hate her for ruining another gift. I picked up one unbroken cookie, ate it, and told her the curse had terrible aim. The exam rules allowed restraints for unstable weapons, so I fitted a control collar and chain that kept Daphne's blade inside a manageable range. The device looked awful and gave Daphne the only safe way to cross a crowded campus without the sword attacking strangers. Sabrina saw us at the assembly field with absolutely no useful context. Be honest, the optics were terrible, with a collar, a chain, and my hand on both. So she asked whether I had developed a very specific hobby during our week apart, while Felix told me from the glove to explain everything. I chose the worst possible answer. I told Sabrina Daphne was part of my strategy. Daphne blushed while Sabrina's eye twitched. The exam horn sounded before either woman could demand clarification. The route ahead would force both sisters to choose who owned their lives, and the Holy Empire had already placed its champion in our way. By the time the mid-year exams started across the wild zone behind the academy, exhausted teams were already stumbling back before mine entered. Every group told the same story. Roxy Slate, the fight addict, had found them, demanded a fight, and removed their interest in continuing. Rex, the kneeling fighter, was assigned to hunt rival teams, but when an instructor pointed him toward me, he refused with the solemn dignity of a man who had already been launched through enough architecture. The exam staff treated Daphne's collar as a risk management tool, but the students treated it as gossip fuel. Two teams whispered that I had brought a prisoner, and a louder rumor decided Sabrina was helping me run some private cult. Sabrina heard them, drew her sword halfway, and asked whether anybody wanted the detailed explanation. Every gossip suddenly found somewhere else to look. The campus rumor machine was already warming up. Notice what the rumor changed? Sabrina and Daphne started defending the same team. Daphne kept her head down until one student called her dangerous. Then she looked at the sword hanging from his belt and calmly answered that his weapon had injured more people this semester than hers had. The boy went quiet because the statistic was public. Sabrina glanced at Daphne, surprised by the counter, and loosened her grip. Their alliance began with shared irritation, which is honestly how most strong teams start. Felix used the glove to remind me that the field would last only a short burst. If I shared the danger boost too early, we would enter the random event with nothing left. So our first goal was to build points through ordinary coordination and save the spirit field for a wave that forced a real choice. My team was Sabrina, Daphne, and the spirit inside my glove. The active rule was simple. Collect points by defeating summoned waves in other teams, then enter one of the random event zones for a major score. Daphne's collar kept her cursed blade inside a safe radius. Sabrina still hated what it looked like, but the first monster wave arrived before the argument could restart. Across the field, Roxy found Bianca. Roxy had learned from our battle royale that Bianca's weak point was me rather than anything on the battlefield, so she stopped trying to win through force and taunted Bianca for failing to protect the person she loved. Bianca's killing pressure spiked so hard, the exam barrier treated Roxy as an emergency threat and force teleported her out of the zone. Roxy landed outside laughing because she had discovered the hidden trigger behind the untouchable student council president. The entire viewing platform heard the word, loved. Bianca returned to her position and pretended nothing had happened. Her aide quietly moved the incident report away before Bianca could rewrite reality. Watch Daphne here, because the collar only mattered when she chose the blade's direction. 3 wolf-shaped creatures split around Sabrina and rushed Daphne from both sides, trying to force the cursed sword into a crowded arc. I called the left timing. Sabrina kicked one beast into the right lane, and Daphne wrapped both targets with a single chain before the blade could choose for her. One creature broke loose and lunged toward the spectator boundary. Daphne dragged it back herself, taking a cut across her palm rather than letting the cursed blade choose the crowd. Director Marshall saw the cost and stopped treating the collar like simple restraint, while Mr. Whitman began marking my calls instead of individual kills. The next wave dropped from above with a classmate riding a stone golem and announcing that Sabrina should join somebody who could protect her. I redirected one creature into her reach. Sabrina cut it, then dropped the golem onto its owner and reminded him I had already protected her from assassins, explosions, and her own bad decisions. The boy tried crawling out from under the golem, and Sabrina offered to help if he repeated the part about protecting her. He discovered silence immediately. Felix activated the team field through my glove, spreading one short burst of emergency strength across both women. Daphne locked the front line, Sabrina released a cyclone through my timing call, and the viewing platform stopped counting individual kills. They had seen the heroine's power before. They had never seen an F-rank coordinator turn 2 dangerous women into one synchronized attack. Outside the barrier, Roxy stopped laughing long enough to memorize our timing, which was the bad news hiding inside the applause. Our score shot to the top. The original hero team found a solo competitor close behind, and the pressure pushed everyone toward the cave marked as the highest value random event. I took Sabrina and Daphne inside because controlling that encounter would secure first place, and because the game route said something important waited there. The cave opened into a sanctuary chamber. Evelyn Drake, the chain-smoking saint, was chained above a holy array, her power feeding the exam construct while imperial priests watched. Daphne saw her sister and forgot every rule. The cursed sword slammed against the collar, chains screamed, and Sabrina had to catch her before she crossed the room. Silas Baird, the Empire's high combat priest, stepped between us and claimed Evelyn had volunteered. Evelyn's face stayed controlled, but she was exhausted, and the array was drawing power faster than she could replace it. Silas invoked Imperial authority and ordered us to leave. I ordered Sabrina to take Evelyn down. Silas called me an F-rank student interfering with sacred business. I told him his rank had failed to make the chains look voluntary. He attacked with the flat of his blade, expecting one strike to end the argument, and I reflected it back into the holy array. The collision cracked the holy array and turned the seizure into a public duel. Director Marshall appeared through the exam projection and warned that the Emperor could be watching. I told her mediocre obedience would never win a vessel's trust, and saving the sisters mattered more than imperial etiquette. Evelyn heard that, and so did Daphne. The sisters faced each other while Sabrina cut the upper chains. Daphne crossed the last 3 steps slowly because the cursed sword kept trying to turn the reunion into an attack. Evelyn saw the collar pull and recognized the angelic residue inside it. Daphne's own resistance controlled the boundary around the cursed sword. Silas tried to use the hesitation. He ordered the priests to increase the array and claimed Daphne's instability proved the Empire had been right to isolate her. The extra power pulled a cry from Evelyn, and that visible pain destroyed the last polite layer of the scene. Sabrina cut the upper chain. I broke the lower anchor with the family style. Daphne caught Evelyn before she hit the floor. For 1 second, the sisters simply held each other. Evelyn had spent years acting controlled so the Empire would spare Daphne. Daphne had spent those same years believing control meant abandonment. The hug paid that misunderstanding without pretending the larger problem was gone. Then Silas drew his blade and demanded the duel, because imperial pride couldn't let witnesses remember the embrace as the final image. Evelyn tried to maintain authority, ordering Daphne to calm the sword and stop embarrassing herself. Daphne accused her of choosing the Empire. Evelyn's control slipped long enough to show the truth. She had endured the arrangement because every refusal threatened Daphne's life. Their reunion exposed Evelyn's sacrifice and left the curse waiting for its next chance. Silas accepted an official no-kill duel. The Emperor had received reports from every public fight where killing intent awakened my strength, so he warned Silas through a crystal. Silas answered with layered buffs, disciplined strikes, and sacred pressure that kept my emergency talent low. Now you tell me, how was I supposed to beat an S-rank priest who had removed the one condition that made me strong? Silas mistook that for victory. He built the advantage carefully. Sacred bands locked around my ankles, a pressure field slowed my arms, and every strike stopped just short of lethal intent. The Emperor had given him the correct counter to my emergency talent, so the crowd watched an S-rank priest dismantle the same student who had punched Sabrina through a wall. Silas used the moment to lecture the teams outside the cave. He said discipline always defeated unstable gifts, that the Empire alone could manage demon vessels, and that my previous victories had been accidents born from reckless opponents. He placed his reputation behind that claim in front of students, priests, tribal observers, and the Imperial projection, giving every witness time to remember exactly what he had promised. I let one sacred band remain around my wrist because guidance needed a connection to active hostile power. Arthur's seal warmed, the demon mark answered, and far across the exam field Bianca felt the link tug against the gray fragment inside her. She had no idea what I was doing, but she knew I was in danger and chose to push power back through the connection. Silas drove me backward, mocked my dependence on danger, and declared that tricks couldn't defeat trained faith, just as Bianca's gray authority answered from across the academy. Black and red pressure filled the chamber. An invisible image of Bianca stood behind me, her sword overlapping mine, and Silas's perception froze under the weight of a demon power he had been taught could never coexist with sacred energy. I read his next strike, stepped inside it, and broke the holy reinforcement around his wrist. Because killing was forbidden, I dropped the sword. Then I punched him through the cave entrance. Silas crossed the exam field and landed in front of the Imperial projection, scattering students as the Emperor stared at me through the crystal. I told him to stop using Evelyn as a battery and stop hunting Daphne through her sister. The Emperor prepared to punish me publicly. Harlan Decker, head of the Tribal Association, stepped onto the viewing platform and called the Imperial conduct shameful. His faction had witnessed the chains, the exhausted saint, and Silas's defeat. That political pressure forced the Emperor to retreat without saving Silas's dignity. My punch had already decided the fight. Harlan only made the Empire swallow the result in public. Silas woke while Harlan was still speaking and tried to stand. His own priests avoided his eyes because they had heard him promise that trained faith couldn't lose. Evelyn stepped between them and refused the hand one priest offered. Daphne remained at her side, collar visible, turning the Empire's rescued resource into a woman publicly choosing her sister. Sabrina retrieved my dropped sword, handed it back hilt first, and immediately asked why Bianca's presence had appeared behind me and whether the two of us were sharing secrets again. The duel had ended, but its reward immediately created relationship pressure exactly where the Emperor could see it. Harlan had expected a talented student and found a faction problem with 3 powerful women, an Imperial enemy, and enough nerve to insult a ruler through a crystal. Before ending the projection, the Emperor ordered Mara Sable, his cat-eyed assassin commander, to place agents around me. Identical command sigils lit at their collars, carrying whatever they heard back to Mara while she monitored the assignment. After the Emperor swallowed the public loss, Harlan fastened the lion-shaped necklace around my neck, explained that it accelerated training, and invited me to his faction's foundry. He liked that I had challenged a stronger institution in public, and he also wanted the man who could command the heroine and a cursed vessel on his side. Daphne stood beside Evelyn, still wearing the collar. Sabrina stood beside me, still suspicious of my strategy. The Imperial priest was unconscious in a crater. Roxy was trying to re-enter the exam from outside, and my score had become irrelevant because every major faction now knew my name. The lion necklace warmed against my chest while a masked Imperial agent stepped onto the nearest roof and turned to follow me. By the next morning, Mara's Imperial agents were already following my windows, but Bianca's demon fusion was the more urgent threat. I spent 1 saved reward on a once-a-day inspection skill and scanned her S-rank physical power, nearly 80% gray demon fusion, and low corruption. See the trap in those numbers. The power was deepening while Bianca still controlled herself, which made her trust relevant without making a cure certain. Bianca caught me staring and asked whether the result was bad. I told her we had less time than I wanted, and instead of asking for the number in front of her aide, she slammed a route map onto my desk with the clock tower circled. Her council access had caught 1 visitor crossing the same guard gap every night. The deadline was measurable now, so I needed that visitor before the gray fragment gained control. I hugged Bianca before thinking. Bianca went rigid, then slowly put both arms around me. Her aide turned away with the exhausted expression of someone who had spent months filing reports about our emotional incompetence. I released Bianca and told her the clock tower visitor was tied to the coming attack. She wanted to know how I knew. I promised an answer after we stopped it, which was becoming my least popular sentence. At the tower, I found King Caspian Mercer sitting alone beside the barrier controls. He looked like a boy, ruled the ruins of a dead kingdom, and carried an immortal homunculus body packed with life-cost alchemy. Every spell he used had consumed lives in the past, so the inspection skill blurred when it touched him. The stigmata on Caspian's chest made the gray mark over my heart burn. For one heartbeat, I saw a child reaching through the smoke of a burning kingdom, then the soul link snapped shut and left me tasting blood. Caspian admitted Vesper had identified me as the greatest obstacle to her plan. He also knew I intended to stop the Academy massacre. Instead of attacking, he asked whether I understood what saving him would require. I told him I knew his real wish. He hated demons, hated the cult, and served Vesper because she had promised a full-power battle capable of ending his immortality. The game treated him as a boss. He saw himself as a child trapped in the bill for a ruined kingdom. I promised to stop the massacre and save both Caspian and the people inside his memories. Caspian asked what I believed. Saving meant for a man begging to die. I told him release was different from annihilation. His curse required a fair, full-powered defeat, but the heart inside his body still carried a child who had never chosen the alchemy. I intended to defeat the weapon and reach the child separately. He laughed at the confidence, then opened one small portal beside my face. A laser passed close enough to burn my hair without triggering full danger. Caspian wanted proof that I understood his control. I named the next 3 attacks before he formed them. His smile faded because the prophet had described me as a manipulator, while the boy king was discovering I truly knew his combat. That competence bought a delay because Caspian wanted the coming full battle more than a quick tower kill. The choice carried 2 planted costs. I had exposed my route knowledge, and Vesper now knew exactly which schedule would hurt me most if broken. He smiled because he wanted to believe me and expected me to fail. Evelyn! The chain-smoking saint and Daphne's older sister confronted me after I left the tower. She had seen the collar, heard my impossible knowledge about the Imperial project, and decided charm was no substitute for answers. She blocked the corridor with sacred chains and demanded to know who had authorized my interference. I named Director Marshall, which was true enough to keep the conversation moving. Then I told Evelyn the Holy Empire had turned her and Daphne into linked pieces of a homunculus program, and the cult planned to exploit that link in an attack 3 days later. Evelyn's cigarette stopped halfway to her mouth. She knew the Empire was using them. She hadn't known the attack date. I reassured her that I intended to protect both sisters, then asked for access to the sanctuary where high angels could be contacted. Evelyn watched Daphne guide the ugly collar instead of letting it guide her. Her sacred chains lowered, and she stepped aside. At the sanctuary gate, Daphne was already inside a ceremonial transport bag so the guards would mistake her for an exorcism subject. You try carrying a chained swordswoman as luggage with a straight face. Evelyn vouched for us. Sabrina came as backup, and I carried the burner into the inner chamber. Evelyn activated the holy array. An angel of virtue entered my mental space, froze the women outside, and pushed past the empty surface I had prepared as bait. The white demon followed it through Daphne's curse. Outside my mind, Daphne's body rose against the collar while Sabrina and Evelyn remained frozen. The angel steel core hadn't been forged yet, so every chain around Daphne tightened as the fragment used her as a doorway. Evelyn couldn't move, but her sacred energy still reacted and fed the array, giving the angel one thin line back to the chamber. Inside, the demon tried a softer tactic before violence. It showed me an image of Daphne free from chains, Bianca free from corruption, and Sabrina safe from every future battle, all in exchange for opening one permanent place inside my soul. The offer used the people I wanted to protect because the demon understood desire better than morality. I rejected it by attacking the link itself. The demon laughed, wrapped the angel tighter, and told me self-destruction would hurt the women more than obedience. So I drove the gray mark into the floor of my own mind. Cracks spread through the empty space, and pain tore through my real body. One more push would rip my soul open with both intruders inside. The demon still wrapped the angel in endless pale hair and offered power if I accepted ownership. It expected a hero who could be controlled through responsibility. I gave it a reckless man willing to make captivity expensive, and I threatened to collapse the whole mental space. The white demon liked the threat. Dangerous attraction reached it just as it had reached the gray fragment. It called me interesting, released the angel, and withdrew after promising the conversation would continue. And the angel was furious that I had used it as bait. It also owed me for stopping the demon from taking control. I requested angel steel, a material that raised divinity and resisted the cursed sword. The angel delivered a white metal core before leaving my mind, and outside, Sabrina woke with her sword against my throat. Evelyn woke smoking from pure irritation. Daphne woke crying because the white demon had touched me through her. I showed them the angel steel before the panic split the group. Evelyn recognized the metal immediately and explained that Miss Voltage could forge it into a crown that stabilized Daphne's curse, while only angel steel or high demon authority could damage it. The sisters finally had a control tool the Empire didn't own. We prepared for the announced attack over the next 2 days. Bianca handled evacuation routes, the Foundry forged Daphne's crown, and Sabrina trained with Felix's field without knowing whose spirit powered it. Ms. Voltage also loaded a reinforced transport shell onto the trial catapult. I assigned its emergency trigger to Sabrina and the sisters. If the tower sealed before they reached me, launch through the roof and complain afterward. Vesper, the veiled prophet who had threatened the professor, attacked on the second afternoon. She appeared inside the barrier as if she had been invited, smiling like a fan meeting her favorite creator. Vesper claimed my interference had caused a butterfly effect, said she understood me better than the demon girls did, and revealed that she knew my plan for Caspian. Vesper wanted to test me while everyone was relaxed, so she moved the attack a full day early. What was all my future knowledge worth after the villain changed the date? The academy barrier cracked behind her and answered for me, and the first crack opened over the dining hall, where students were celebrating the exam results. A portal dropped armored beasts directly onto the tables. The second opened beside the recovery wing. The third split the courtyard route Bianca had planned to use the next morning. Vesper had studied our preparation and attacked every location before its defenders arrived. Vesper targeted the people who trusted my schedule, because hurting them broke the plan faster than attacking me first. The first casualty report reached my communication crystal before Vesper vanished, and for one hard second I saw the cost of believing knowledge made me control the story. Then Sabrina's voice came through from the dining hall. She had survived, organized the hero team, and demanded my next call, while Bianca's aide reported that the recovery wing was already moving patients. Vesper had hurt people, but my allies were acting without waiting for rescue. Sabrina overturned a banquet table into a barricade, the team priestess kept the wounded conscious, and our combat instructor cut a path to the side doors. The same students who had mocked Daphne's collar grabbed its spare chain and used it as a guide rope through the smoke. At the recovery wing, Bianca's aide ignored the safe roster order, broke a restricted lock, and moved patients down a service stair Vesper had meant to trap. Neither response came from my schedule, which mattered because Vesper had built the attack around me being the only person who knew what to do. Those choices denied her the clean collapse she wanted, but guards still died at the library stairs while Director Marshall lost barrier sections faster than she could repair them. Bianca took command of the evacuation and ordered me toward the safe route, but I refused and told her the tower controlled the stolen barrier energy, so following me could still save the academy. She demanded one reason to trust a man who kept secrets even while asking for her life. I gave her every visible result: the train, the assassins, the reception, Malcolm, and the cave. I had talked around the truth, but my actions had always moved toward protecting people. Bianca looked at the burning campus, then abandoned the safe route and followed me. Imperial agents blocked the path near the west courtyard. They admitted their orders only required keeping me alive, not saving students. The command sigils on their collars were still lit, carrying every word back to Mara, so I looked at the nearest one and called, "Mara Sable, your people are wasting time." The shadows around the courtyard moved. Mara, the Emperor's assassin commander, had never introduced herself to me in this timeline, but the system's attraction profile had marked her the moment he assigned her. Hearing her name through her own command channel turned professional suspicion into sharp interest. Mara stepped onto the roofline, cat-eyed and smiling, and asked what I planned to offer for her help. I told her the truth about the immediate stakes. If the tower fell, there would be no empire left to pay her. Mara ordered every assassin under her command to clear the campus routes. The agents who had blocked us changed direction without another argument. They cut the evacuation gate open, hauled wounded students off the library stairs, and held the lane under a monster's claws. The officer who had called the campus expendable ended up shielding the same students, while Mara watched from the roof and mentally added every rescue to the price of my explanation. Then she pointed one knife at me and said I would explain how I knew her name after we survived. Bianca confronted me as we crossed the burning west courtyard. Mara's assassins were clearing monsters behind us, students were running toward the opened route, and the clock tower shook every time Caspian pulled more energy from the barrier. Bianca chose that moment because she knew there might not be another one. She told me I had never been fully sincere because I always knew too much, arrived too early, and gave just enough truth to make people follow. Every accusation was accurate. Bianca said my secrets could wait because every action she had witnessed pointed in the same direction, and she followed me toward the tower anyway. Bianca had every reason to leave me in that courtyard, and she followed while knowing I had hidden the largest part of myself. Be honest, that was more trust than I deserved. A regenerating flesh monster blocked the tower entrance. It was an immortal mass of muscle and mouths that regenerated faster than ordinary blades could cut. Bianca attacked first, but its hide caught her sword and snapped the weapon near the guard. Bianca looked genuinely shaken, which I had never seen before. The family style was her identity, her control, and the thing standing between her and the demon. Now she held half a blade while the monster rebuilt every wound. I reminded her of the train. She had thought I protected her then. The truth was messier, but the consequence had become real. Since that day, we had kept choosing each other under pressure. A broken sword did not erase that. Bianca looked at the remaining blade, adjusted her grip, and drove the broken weapon into one of the monster's mouths while I climbed the tower stairs. She stopped measuring herself by the full sword and held the creature in place with what remained. At the top chamber, King Caspian Mercer stood inside the barrier core with black portals opening behind him. He admitted the prophet had accelerated the invasion because she wanted to break my plan, but the attack still served his own goal. Caspian had lived for centuries inside a body that couldn't die, carrying the deaths used to build his kingdom's final weapon. Vesper had promised him a full-powered defeat. He wanted a fair duel, one where the opponent understood his curse and allowed him to use everything. I accepted the duel, and Caspian stated the rule precisely. Caspian had to fight at 100%, and I had to defeat the heart of his homunculus body without stealing the conclusion through an execution. If the contest became unfair, the curse would rebuild him. If I failed, the barrier energy stayed inside him and the academy fell. Caspian opened with the tentacle and laser pattern I knew from the game, so I spent the first minute moving before each portal finished forming. To the students below, I looked cowardly. Caspian knew every dodge denied him the clean hit that had erased earlier challengers, and his smile grew each time I called the next attack before it appeared. The students below started calling the pattern with me left portal, floor strike, laser, because every correct prediction made the tower flicker and opened another few seconds for evacuation. Caspian let that confidence build before he changed one pattern. A tentacle came through the floor, drained half my mana through the sacred shield, and knocked Felix's glove away. Caspian sent the next lasers at the glove because he understood the spirit would matter once my team arrived. I baited him toward it, kicked a broken gear into the barrier core, and slid through the flickering portal to recover Felix. The third laser still cut my shoulder, and the crowd below stopped calling patterns because future knowledge had just reached its expiration date. Bianca heard the rhythm change and stopped trying to kill the regenerating monster. She pinned the body, ignored the jaws closing around her arm, and cut off the one piece she could send upward. The severed head flew through the window. Bianca had cut it loose after pinning the body, and the regenerating mass exploded when it crossed Caspian's portal field. I used the blast to break two tentacles and reach the inner platform. Bianca couldn't follow because the remaining creature still blocked the stairs, but her attack had bought the opening she promised. Caspian expanded the portals and prepared the next phase. A catapult slammed into the tower roof. Sabrina and the sisters arrived inside the reinforced shell Miss Voltage had loaded onto the trial catapult. Daphne wore the angel steel crown, and her cursed sword finally moved with her instead of against her. Sabrina climbed out furious that I had started without them. Evelyn, the chain-smoking saint, lit a cigarette beside a burning portal and called the timing acceptable. At this point, a catapult through the roof counted as good news, and you may judge my standards later. Caspian attacked before the reunion could become a committee. I called the first laser. Evelyn raised a sacred barrier. I named the second tentacle. Daphne's chained sword cut it at the joint. Sabrina used Felix's team field through my glove, took the shared emergency strength, and drove through an angle Caspian had left open only because no ordinary body could reach it. The fight became a moving calculation. Caspian expected Sabrina's direct charge, so I sent Daphne first. He turned his barrier toward the cursed blade, and Evelyn struck the exposed support with holy power. When he adapted to Evelyn, Sabrina came through the floor. When he trapped Sabrina, Daphne's chains pulled her clear. Caspian tried splitting them with 3 portals at once. One opened under Evelyn, another sealed around Daphne's chains, and the third dropped a laser behind Sabrina. I called the order backward. Sabrina cut Evelyn's portal before landing. Evelyn reinforced the cracked crown instead of defending herself, and Daphne used the freed chain to yank Sabrina past the laser. The move cost all 3 of them. Evelyn's barrier flickered, Daphne's wrists bled, and Sabrina lost part of her sleeve. But Caspian's smile finally changed. He had stopped testing my team and started trying to survive it. Meanwhile, the students below saw the tower portals flicker every time our attacks landed. Director Marshall stopped trying to rebuild the entire barrier and redirected power into the routes we were opening. Mr. Whitman held the courtyard. Mara's assassins carried wounded trainees through gaps they had been ordered to ignore 10 minutes earlier. Caspian enjoyed the battles so much that every successful counter made him use more of the life-cost alchemy stored inside his body. He released a storm of life-cost spears. Evelyn blocked the first wave, but the barrier broke on the second. Sabrina took a spear through the side of her coat. Daphne's crown cracked under the white demon's pressure. My emergency talent surged because all 3 women were now inside lethal range. I shared the power through Felix's field. Sabrina stood, blood on one sleeve, and asked whether I had a plan or another terrible surprise. I told her the heart would appear after Caspian's child form surfaced. She answered that this would have been useful earlier, then smiled because she knew exactly what I wanted. The stigmata over my heart burned with the same soul link that had flashed Caspian's burning kingdom in the tower. Once his black heart surfaced, the mark could open the full memory, but every extra person inside that link gave the curse another life to consume. Daphne locked the outer tentacles with her chains. Evelyn poured holy power into the angel steel crown, forcing the white demon back. Sabrina ran along the tightened chains, launched from my shoulder, and struck the center barrier as I drove the gray authority into its demonic core. The shell broke. Caspian's giant form collapsed into a small boy, and the black heart appeared exactly as the fair dual rule had promised. The women had completed their part, the final step was mine, and the soul link had already shown me what it would cost. I told Sabrina, Evelyn, and Daphne to leave. Sabrina refused while Daphne grabbed my sleeve and said I would die, but Evelyn saw the stigmata over my heart reacting to Caspian's soul and realized extra people inside the link would give the curse more lives to consume. Evelyn dragged Sabrina toward the exit while Daphne's chains resisted every step. I promised Daphne I would come back with food. She hated the joke because she knew I was scared. Once they cleared the chamber, I touched Caspian's heart and the mark opened beneath my hand. Pain tore through every memory at once. I fell into the ruins of Caspian's kingdom and found him as a child watching the capital burn. The adults around him had turned lives into alchemy, built his immortal body, and called the result salvation. Caspian had carried their final command for centuries because nobody had ever offered him another ending. He asked whether I had come to kill him. I told him I had come to end the curse without abandoning the child inside it. The memory tried to throw me out. Burning soldiers grabbed my arms. The old king ordered Caspian to keep paying the kingdom's debt. I used the demon mark to hold the soul link and the last of my sacred power to keep the dead commands from closing around him. There was no joke left in me. I held out my hand and promised to save both Caspian and the people trapped in his memory. The kingdom was already gone, but their pain did not need to keep eating him. Caspian looked at the burning throne, then at me. For the first time, the choice belonged to him. He took my hand, and the fair contest ended. Caspian acknowledged my victory. The black heart dissolved, and every portal above the academy closed at once. Stolen energy rushed back into the barrier. The cracked sky sealed, the remaining monsters collapsed, and the tower stopped shaking under my feet. The system rewarded me with points. Caspian's voice came through the fading soul link once, calm, alive, and free of the curse, before the chamber floor gave out beneath me. The barrier restoration hit the campus like a physical wave. Sacred lamps reignited from the tower outward. Students who had been holding doors felt the monsters lose strength. Miss Voltage's unfinished weapons stopped overloading, and Director Marshall finally released the spell she had been carrying since the first crack. Below, the weakening monsters, returning lamps, and opened roots told everyone the portals were closing before they learned why. Bianca caught me on the lower landing. Her first question was whether I was alive. Her second was why Sabrina, Evelyn, and Daphne had joined the decisive fight without her. I called it jealousy, and Bianca denied the accusation while demanding the replacement dinner I still owed. Sabrina climbed through the broken roof behind her and asked whether Bianca planned to schedule dates during disaster recovery. Bianca replied that Sabrina had already stolen enough private combat time. Daphne celebrated by hugging Evelyn hard enough to knock the cigarette from her fingers. The sisters were together, but Evelyn warned that the Holy Emperor still controlled the homunculus project and would continue hunting them both. A small fire witch from the support team saw Evelyn reach for another cigarette and burned the pack to ash. Evelyn stared at her as if she had committed an international crime, and Daphne laughed without checking whether the curse approved. Across the courtyard, Sabrina looked at the restored barrier and questioned whether she deserved the hero title. She had fought beside me, broken Caspian's shell, and saved hundreds of students, but Felix's legacy still sat on her shoulders. Chloe reminded her that heroes were the people who arrived when the plan was already on fire and acted anyway. Felix heard from inside my glove and went silent. After the wounded removed, Director Marshall found us in the ruined council hall and warned that the cult and the Holy Empire would keep hunting us. The academy had survived, but what happens when you take the future final boss and the heroine home to meet your father? Director Marshall answered by placing 2 travel orders on the table and tapping both names. You leave tomorrow, Logan. Take Bianca and Sabrina home with you.